Evelyn Moore had exactly 30 seconds to decide. Reveal the pregnancy she'd hidden for 5 months, or let the man holding a gun to her temple believe she was expendable. The forensic accountant who'd spent her career making numbers confess their sins now faced her own reckoning. Luca DeSantis stood 15 feet away, his hand hovering near his concealed weapon, his dark eyes calculating trajectories and collateral damage. He didn't know about the life growing beneath her tailored blazer. He didn't know she'd uncovered the one transaction that could destroy his empire, and he certainly didn't know she was about to collapse. Before we dive into Evelyn's impossible choice, I want to invite you on this journey. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, New York, London, Tokyo, Sao Paulo, drop your city in the comments below. I love seeing how far these stories travel, and if you're ready for a tale of secrets, survival, and unexpected protection, hit that like button and settle in. This story doesn't let go. The first sign of trouble arrived on a Tuesday morning in the form of a manila folder. Evelyn Moore sat in her corner office at Sterling & Associates, the mid-tier accounting firm where she'd built her reputation one meticulous audit at a time, and stared at the assignment that would unravel everything. The file was thicker than usual, bound with security tape, marked with red confidential stamps that suggested someone important was worried about what lived inside those pages. DeSantis Import Group, the label read. Priority? Immediate. Clearance? Level 4. She'd heard the name before. Everyone in financial circles had. Luca DeSantis operated one of the largest import operations on the East Coast. Luxury goods, artisan products, specialty foods from Italy, France, Spain. On paper, he was a legitimate businessman with a gift for identifying market trends and an uncanny ability to negotiate favorable terms with European suppliers. In whispers, he was something else entirely. Evelyn adjusted her blazer, pulling the tailored navy fabric a little tighter across her midsection. At 5 months pregnant, she'd become an expert in camouflage. Structured jackets in dark colors, high-waisted pants with forgiving waistbands, careful posture that minimized her profile when she stood. She told no one about the pregnancy, not her colleagues, not her distant family, not even her doctor, beyond the minimum required for basic prenatal care. This baby was hers alone. The father was a mistake she'd made exactly once, a conference hookup with a married partner from a rival firm who'd made it clear the next morning that his career, his wife, and his reputation mattered more than whatever consequences might follow. She'd deleted his number, thrown away the hotel keycard, and decided within 48 hours that she would handle this the same way she handled everything else in her life, with discipline, planning, and absolute self-reliance. The pregnancy would remain invisible until she could no longer hide it. Then she would take leave, have the baby in a city where no one knew her, and return to work with a carefully constructed story about a family situation that required temporary relocation. She'd already researched small towns in the Midwest where medical care was adequate but anonymity was guaranteed. She had savings. She had a plan. What she didn't have was time to waste on a complicated audit. But Martin Sterling, the senior partner who'd built the firm from nothing and still treated every case like a personal mission, had other ideas. This one's important, Evelyn. He stood in her doorway, 70 years old and sharp as broken glass, his silver hair combed back from a face that had seen every variety of financial deception. The client is paying triple our usual rate for expedited service. They want someone who can move fast, dig deep, and keep their mouth shut. Who's the client? Evelyn asked, though she already suspected the answer. Federal prosecutors. They're building a case, but they need documentation first. DeSantis has been careful, very careful. His books look clean at first glance, but they think there's something underneath, something worth finding. Evelyn felt the baby shift inside her, a flutter of movement that still surprised her every time. She placed her hand on her stomach beneath the desk where Martin couldn't see, a private acknowledgement of the complication her life had become. How long do I have? 6 weeks, maybe 8 if you can justify the extension. They want a preliminary report in 3. It was aggressive even by federal standards. The kind of timeline that suggested urgency or desperation. Evelyn had worked with prosecutors before, had testified in cases where her careful analysis of financial records had helped send embezzlers and fraudsters to prison. She understood the rhythm of these investigations, the way they built slowly toward inevitable conclusions. But this felt different, rushed, almost reckless. "What if there's nothing to find?" she asked. Martin smiled, a thin expression that didn't reach his eyes. "Then you'll be the first person in 20 years to look at DeSantis's operation and come away clean. I'm not betting on that outcome." He left the folder on her desk and walked away, his footsteps echoing down the hallway toward his own office. Evelyn waited until she heard his door close before she opened the file. The numbers inside were beautiful. That was the first thing she noticed. Most criminal enterprises left obvious scars in their accounting: sudden cash infusions with vague explanations, payroll anomalies, inventory discrepancies that suggested theft or laundering. But DeSantis's books were pristine, every transaction documented, every expense justified. Revenue streams that flowed logically from documented contracts with verified suppliers. It was almost too perfect. And in Evelyn's experience, perfection was often just another word for deception. She spent the rest of the day building a preliminary analysis, mapping the structure of DeSantis Import Group through its financial skeleton. The company operated through a web of subsidiaries and partner organizations, each layer designed to obscure the ultimate destination of funds while maintaining plausible legitimacy. Import companies often used this structure for tax purposes, spreading liability and taking advantage of different jurisdictional regulations. But the deeper Evelyn dug, the more she noticed patterns that didn't quite fit standard business practice. Payments to shipping companies that existed only on paper. Consulting fees to individuals with no apparent expertise in import logistics. Real estate holdings purchased through shell corporations and leased back to DeSantis's primary business at rates that seemed designed to move money rather than generate profit. It was brilliant, really. Each transaction individually defensible, but collectively suggesting a system built to hide something. By the time Evelyn left the office that evening, her lower back ached and her ankles had begun to swell. Pregnancy symptoms she could no longer entirely ignore. She took the subway home to her small apartment in a transitional neighborhood where rent was almost affordable and neighbors minded their own business. She'd lived here for 3 years, ever since the divorce from her college boyfriend had finalized, and she'd decided that starting over meant stripping life down to its essential elements. The apartment was spare, but clean. 1 bedroom, a kitchen barely large enough for a single person, a living room with a second-hand couch, and a bookshelf filled with financial textbooks and mystery novels. She'd never bothered to decorate beyond the basics. There seemed no point when she spent most of her time at work anyway. Now, standing in her small kitchen, eating leftover pasta straight from the container, Evelyn wondered what kind of space a baby would need. She'd avoided thinking about it in concrete terms, as though not planning might somehow make the whole situation less real. But reality had a way of insisting on acknowledgement. She was going to be a mother in 4 months. She was going to be responsible for another human life. And she was doing it alone, by choice, because trusting anyone else had proven consistently unreliable. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like just another problem to solve. Calculate the variables, minimize risk, execute the plan. The DeSantis audit could be finished in 6 weeks if she focused. The fee would help cover medical expenses and build her emergency fund. Then she could take her leave, have the baby, and return to her carefully controlled existence. Simple, logical, achievable. She went to bed that night believing she had everything under control. Also, the DeSantis Import Group headquarters occupied a renovated warehouse in a waterfront district that had been industrial 20 years ago and was now being aggressively gentrified by developers with vision and investors with patience. The building's exterior maintained its original brick facade, but inside someone had spent serious money creating an environment that suggested European sophistication. Exposed beams, polished concrete floors, art that looked expensive without being ostentatious. Evelyn arrived at 9 o'clock on a Thursday morning, carrying her laptop case and wearing her most structured blazer over a black dress that skimmed her figure without revealing its changes. She'd been given access to a conference room and promised cooperation from DeSantis's financial staff. What she hadn't been promised was a meeting with Luca DeSantis himself. He was waiting in the conference room when she arrived. Luca DeSantis looked exactly like his photographs, and nothing like them at the same time. The photos suggested a successful businessman in his late 30s, dark hair cut short, strong features, expensive suits worn with casual confidence. In person, he carried something the photographs couldn't capture, a quality of focused attention that made Evelyn feel simultaneously visible and assessed. He stood when she entered, a gesture of old-fashioned courtesy that felt genuine rather than performative. "Miss Moore, thank you for taking this assignment." His voice carried a faint accent, Italian softened by years of American business. "I understand you have questions about my operation." Evelyn set her laptop case on the conference table and met his gaze directly. She'd learned early in her career that showing deference to powerful men only encouraged them to waste her time. "I have questions about your financial records, Mr. DeSantis. Whether you choose to answer them is your decision. I'm here to conduct an audit, not an interrogation." Something shifted in his expression, not quite a smile, but an acknowledgement of her directness. "I appreciate clarity. Please, sit. My team has prepared the documentation you requested. If you need anything else, my assistant will coordinate access. I'll need to speak with your controller, your purchasing director, and whoever manages your relationships with shipping companies." "Of course, I'll make sure they're available." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Ms. Moore, may I ask you something?" Evelyn felt a flicker of tension. "You can ask. Do you believe I'm guilty of whatever the prosecutors think I've done?" It was a dangerous question, the kind designed to test boundaries and establish power dynamics. Evelyn had encountered it before from audit subjects who thought charm or intimidation might influence her conclusions. "I believe financial records tell stories," she said carefully. "Whether those stories match your intentions is something I'll determine based on evidence, not assumptions." Lucas studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. "Then I look forward to learning what story you find." He left, closing the door quietly behind him. Evelyn released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding and pressed her hand against her stomach where the baby had started moving again, as though responding to her elevated heart rate. 6 weeks. She just needed to survive 6 weeks. The first 3 days of the audit proceeded exactly as Evelyn expected. DeSantis's financial team was professional and cooperative, providing documentation promptly and answering questions without obvious evasion. The controller, a sharp woman named Patricia Chen, seemed genuinely committed to maintaining clean books and expressed frustration with the implication that anything improper might be happening under her watch. "I've worked for Mr. DeSantis for 8 years, Patricia said during their second meeting, her fingers drumming against the conference table. "He's demanding, but he's always been clear about operating legally. If there's something wrong in these records, I want to know about it." Evelyn believed her. She'd developed a sense over the years for when people were lying about financial matters, and Patricia's frustration felt authentic, which meant either the controller was being deceived along with everyone else, or the illegal activity, if it existed, was being managed outside normal channels. By the end of the first week, Evelyn had confirmed what her preliminary analysis suggested. The obvious transactions were clean. Whatever secrets DeSantis Import Group was hiding, they weren't in the primary accounting system. She submitted her first progress report to the prosecutors on Friday afternoon, explaining that she needed access to secondary records, personal accounts, subsidiary transactions, private investment portfolios. The kind of information that required additional warrants and cooperation from financial institutions. The response came back within hours. Approved. Keep digging. That was when Evelyn realized the prosecutors weren't fishing. They already knew something. They just needed her to document it. The thought should have reassured her. Instead, it made her nervous. She was walking to the subway that evening, her laptop case heavy on her shoulder and exhaustion settling into her bones, when she noticed the car. Black sedan, tinted windows, parked across the street from the DeSantis building. She'd seen it before, 3 times in the past week, always in a different location, but always within sight of wherever she happened to be. Evelyn wasn't paranoid by nature. She dealt in facts, not feelings, but facts suggested she was being followed. She considered calling the police, then dismissed it. What would she say? Someone was parked legally on a public street? She had no evidence of threat, no proof of intent, just an uncomfortable awareness that she was being watched. Instead, she changed her routine. Different subway line, different route home. She started leaving the office at unpredictable times, sometimes early, sometimes late, breaking the pattern someone might use to track her movements. The black sedan disappeared for 2 days. Then it returned, now accompanied by a gray SUV that followed her from her apartment to a coffee shop 3 blocks away. Evelyn sat in the coffee shop with her hands wrapped around a decaf latte she didn't want and tried to think logically. Someone was watching her. The question was who and why. Possibility 1. Federal agents assigned to protect a valuable witness in an ongoing investigation. But that didn't feel right. Protection details announced themselves, established contact, coordinated security. These vehicles stayed just visible enough to be noticed, but made no attempt at communication. Possibility 2. DeSantis's people monitoring the auditor who might expose something dangerous. That made more sense, except for one problem. If DeSantis wanted to know what she was finding, he could simply ask his own financial team. Patricia Chen had full access to Evelyn's work and was required to review her preliminary findings. Possibility 3. Someone else entirely. A rival. A threat. Someone who saw Evelyn as leverage or a problem to be eliminated. That possibility made her hand drift unconsciously to her stomach, a protective gesture she'd started making without thinking. She was still sitting in the coffee shop trying to decide her next move when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something, instinct or curiosity, made her pick up. "Miss Moore," Luca DeSantis's voice, calm and controlled. "Are you somewhere safe?" Evelyn felt ice slide down her spine. "Why are you asking me that?" "Because you're being followed, and based on the vehicles involved, it's not federal protection." "How do you know I'm being followed?" "Because I have people watching you too." The admission should have outraged her. Instead, it clarified everything. "Who are they?" "That's what I'm trying to determine, but I think you should come back to the office. Now, we need to talk." Evelyn looked out the coffee shop window at the gray SUV parked half a block away. As she watched, a second vehicle, a dark blue sedan, pulled up beside it. The SUV's doors opened. 3 men got out, their body language suggesting purpose and coordination. They were moving toward the coffee shop. "Miss Moore," Luca's voice had taken on a new urgency. "Are you still there?" "They're coming in," Evelyn whispered. "Then you need to leave, right now. There's a back exit through the kitchen. My driver is in the alley behind the building. White Mercedes, license plate starting with 7 Delta. Get in the car. Do it now." Evelyn didn't waste time arguing. She grabbed her laptop case and moved toward the back of the coffee shop, past the counter where a barista looked up in surprise. "Sorry, emergency," Evelyn said, pushing through the kitchen door. The cook shouted something, but she was already past him, through the prep area, out the back door into an alley that smelled like garbage and rain. The white Mercedes was exactly where Luca said it would be, engine running, back door open. A man stood beside it, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark suit that didn't quite hide the gun at his hip. "Miss Moore, please, get in." Evelyn hesitated for exactly 1 second. Then she heard shouts from inside the coffee shop and made her decision. She dove into the Mercedes, the driver slammed the door, and the car was moving before she'd even fastened her seatbelt. Through the rear window, she saw 3 men burst into the alley. One of them reached inside his jacket. Another pulled out a phone. Then the Mercedes turned onto a main street, and the alley disappeared from view. Evelyn pressed her hand against her chest, feeling her heart slam against her ribs. The baby moved inside her, a rolling sensation that might have been distress or simply response to her elevated adrenaline. "Where are we going?" she asked. The driver met her eyes in the rearview mirror. "Somewhere safe, ma'am. Mr. DeSantis will explain everything." Evelyn leaned back against the leather seat and closed her eyes. Her carefully controlled life had just cracked wide open, and the man holding the pieces was exactly the person she'd been hired to investigate. The irony wasn't lost on her. Neither was the danger. The Mercedes drove for 40 minutes, leaving the city behind and heading into the suburbs where old estates sat on manicured properties behind stone walls and iron gates. Evelyn watched the landscape change through the tinted windows, trying to maintain calm through sheer force of will. She was a forensic accountant. She solved problems with spreadsheets and documentation. She did not get chased by armed men or rescued by subjects under federal investigation. This was not her life, except it was now. The car turned through a gate that opened automatically, following a curved driveway to a house that could only be described as a mansion. 3 stories of stone and glass, elegant without being ostentatious, surrounded by gardens that suggested serious money and professional maintenance. Luca DeSantis stood on the front steps, his suit jacket discarded, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms that suggested he was more than just a businessman playing at power. He opened the car door himself before the driver could move. "Are you hurt?" His eyes scanned her face, her body, looking for injuries with the kind of practiced assessment that suggested he'd done this before. "I'm fine." Evelyn climbed out of the car, her legs unsteady. "Who were those men?" "Come inside. We'll talk." She wanted to refuse to demand answers before she took another step into whatever this situation had become. But exhaustion and fear were making her lightheaded, and the baby was moving with increased agitation. She needed to sit down. She needed water. She needed to think. Luca guided her inside with a hand barely touching her lower back, a gesture of support rather than control. The interior of the house matched the exterior's refined elegance. Antique furniture, art that belonged in museums, floors that gleamed under carefully placed lighting. He led her to a sitting room where floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked gardens that seemed to stretch forever. A woman appeared with water and tea without being asked, setting the tray on a low table before disappearing as silently as she'd arrived. "Sit," Luca said gently. "Please." Evelyn sat, grateful for the supportive cushions and the chance to take weight off her swollen ankles. She accepted the water and drank half of it before setting the glass down with shaking hands. Luca sat across from her, his posture relaxed, but his attention focused entirely on her face. "I owe you an explanation." "You owe me several." "Fair enough." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped together. "The men following you work for the Volkov organization, Russian syndicate with operations all along the East Coast. They've been trying to move into import logistics for the past 2 years, and they see my business as either an opportunity or an obstacle." "Why would they be following me?" "Because you're auditing my books for the federal government, which means you either find something incriminating that they can use against me, or you find nothing and confirm that I'm clean enough to be worth eliminating rather than corrupting. Either way, you're valuable to them." Evelyn felt her chest tighten. "You're saying I'm in danger because I took this assignment. I'm saying you were in danger the moment the prosecutors filed for access to my records. The Volkovs have sources inside federal law enforcement. They knew about the audit before I did." "Then why didn't you warn me earlier?" "Because I hoped I was wrong. I hoped they'd be smart enough to leave you alone." His jaw tightened. "I was mistaken." Evelyn pressed her hand against her stomach, a protective gesture she could no longer hide. "I need to contact the prosecutors. Get police protection. This is beyond. Police protection won't help." Luca's voice was gentle but firm. "The Volkovs have reach. They've compromised officers before. And if you go into witness protection, you lose everything. Your career, your life, any chance at normalcy." "As opposed to what? Hiding in your mansion while you fight territorial battles with Russian gangsters?" "As opposed to letting me protect you while we figure out who's compromised and how deep this goes. You're already here. You're already safe. And if you walk away now, they'll find you again within 24 hours. He was right, and Evelyn hated that he was right. She'd built her entire life on the principle of self-reliance, on never needing anyone or anything she couldn't control. Now she was sitting in a criminal's house, dependent on his protection, carrying a secret that made her vulnerable in ways she'd never imagined. "How long?" she asked quietly. "How long until you're safe? I don't know. Until we eliminate the threat, or you finish the audit and the prosecutors make their move. Whichever comes first." Evelyn looked out the windows at the gardens beyond, at the peaceful landscape that concealed armed security and careful surveillance. "What if I refuse? What if I just get in a car and drive away?" Luca met her eyes with an expression that mixed respect and regret. "Then you'll probably be dead by morning, and I'll spend the rest of my life knowing I could have prevented it." The certainty in his voice made her believe him. Whatever else Luca DeSantis might be, criminal, businessman, manipulator, he was also someone who understood danger with the clarity of lived experience. Evelyn closed her eyes and made a calculation. Risk of staying versus risk of leaving. Probability of survival versus probability of loss. The numbers aligned with brutal simplicity. She had no good options, only different degrees of terrible. "I'll stay," she said finally, "but I continue the audit. I don't stop working just because the situation got complicated. I wouldn't expect you to. And I need to know everything. No more secrets, no more surprises. If I'm trusting you with my life, you need to trust me with the truth." Luca studied her for a long moment, something unreadable moving behind his dark eyes. "The truth is complicated, Ms. Moore." "Most truths are. Tell me anyway." He stood and walked to the windows, his silhouette backlit by the fading afternoon sun. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of confession. "I didn't build this empire from nothing. I inherited pieces of it from my uncle, a man who understood that sometimes the difference between legal and illegal is just a matter of documentation and timing. For 10 years, I've been trying to clean it up, legitimize the operations, distance myself from the associations that would put me in prison if the wrong evidence came to light." He turned to face her. "I'm not innocent, Ms. Moore, but I'm not what the prosecutors think I am either. And the Volkovs want to drag me back into the world I've spent a decade trying to escape." Evelyn absorbed this, fitting it against the financial patterns she'd already identified. The shell companies, the unusual payment structures, your unwinding old criminal infrastructure. While trying not to trigger investigations or gang wars in the process, it's a delicate balance. And the prosecutors don't know this. The prosecutors see patterns that match organized crime and assume continuity. They're not entirely wrong, but they're not seeing the whole picture either. It was the kind of moral complexity Evelyn had learned to navigate in her career. Situations where legal and ethical didn't perfectly align, where people made mistakes and then spent years trying to correct them without losing everything in the process. "I'll need access to everything," she said. "The real books. The complete history. I can't protect you if I don't understand what I'm protecting." "Agreed. But first, you need rest. You look exhausted." Evelyn started to protest, then realized he was right. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind bone-deep fatigue that made thinking difficult. "I don't have clothes. I don't have my things." "I'll have someone collect what you need from your apartment. For tonight, there are guest rooms upstairs. Everything you'll need is already there." It was too smooth, too prepared, like he'd been planning for this possibility all along. "How long have you been watching me?" Evelyn asked. "Since the moment you walked into my building." He said it without apology. "I protect what's valuable, Ms. Moore, and whether you intended it or not, you became valuable the day you took this case." She should have been angry, should have felt violated by the surveillance and manipulation, but instead, she felt something more complicated, a reluctant recognition that someone had been looking out for her when she thought she was entirely alone. The baby shifted inside her, and Evelyn pressed her hand against her stomach again. Luca's eyes dropped to the gesture, his expression changing in a way she couldn't quite read. "How far along are you?" he asked quietly. Evelyn's breath caught. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. I've been watching you for 2 weeks, remember? I've seen the way you move, the way you avoid certain foods in the staff kitchen, the careful way you sit down and stand up." He paused. 5 months? Maybe 6? She could deny it, should deny it. But what was the point? He'd already guessed, and she was too tired to maintain the deception. 5 months, she admitted, and it's none of your business. "No," Luca agreed. "But it does make this situation more complicated, for both of us." Evelyn stood, needing to reclaim some sense of control even as the room tilted slightly from exhaustion. "I'm going to rest. Tomorrow we'll start over. New terms. Complete transparency. And Mr. DeSantis? Yes? If you're lying to me about any of this, I will make sure the prosecutors get every piece of evidence they need to put you away for the rest of your life. Pregnancy and danger don't make me vulnerable. They make me extremely motivated to survive. Remember that." Something that might have been admiration flickered across his face. "I'll remember, Miss Moore." She followed the housekeeper, the same silent woman who'd brought tea, up a curved staircase to a guest room that was larger than her entire apartment. The bed looked like something from a luxury hotel. The attached bathroom featured a tub big enough to swim in, and someone had already laid out toiletries and a silk robe. Evelyn locked the door, checked the windows, and then finally allowed herself to collapse onto the bed. She lay there in the growing darkness, one hand on her stomach, feeling the baby move with increasing vigor now that she was still enough to notice. "We're in trouble," she whispered to the life inside her. "But we're going to be okay, I promise." It was a promise she had no business making, but she made it anyway, because the alternative was admitting that she'd lost control completely, and Evelyn Moore was not ready to admit that. Not yet. Outside the locked door, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Security making rounds. Protection she hadn't asked for but desperately needed. She closed her eyes and let exhaustion pull her under, knowing that when she woke up, everything would be different. The audit, the danger, the carefully constructed walls she'd built around her life. All of it was crumbling. And the man responsible for both the destruction and her survival was the same person she'd been hired to destroy. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so terrifying. Evelyn woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the disorienting realization that she wasn't in her own bed. For a moment, panic flared, then memory returned in a rush. The coffee shop, the chase, the mansion, Luca DeSantis. She sat up slowly, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach. The baby was quiet now, settled after yesterday's chaos. 22 weeks. Just past the halfway point. Every day that passed brought her closer to the moment when hiding would no longer be possible, when her body would announce what her discipline had kept secret. A soft knock at the door made her tense. "Miss Moore?" A woman's voice, accented and professional. "I have breakfast for you, and your things from the apartment." Evelyn wrapped herself in the silk robe and opened the door to find the housekeeper from yesterday holding a tray laden with food and a suitcase that Evelyn recognized as her own. The woman was perhaps 50, with kind eyes and the efficient demeanor of someone who'd worked in wealthy households long enough to anticipate needs before they were spoken. "Mr. DeSantis thought you might want your own clothes," the woman said, setting the tray on a small table near the window. "I'm Maria. If you need anything, there's a phone by the bed, extension 3. "Thank you." Evelyn took the suitcase, feeling oddly vulnerable that strangers had been in her apartment, touching her belongings. "How did you get in?" "Mr. DeSantis has resources." Maria's expression remained neutral. "He's particular about the people he protects. Eat, please. You need strength." She left before Evelyn could ask more questions. The breakfast was elaborate, fresh fruit, pastries, eggs prepared exactly how Evelyn preferred them, though she'd never mentioned her preferences to anyone. The coffee was decaf, which meant someone had been paying very close attention indeed. Evelyn ate mechanically, her mind already working through the implications of her situation. She was trapped, not by locked doors or armed guards, but by the simple mathematics of survival. Going back to her apartment meant exposure. Going to the police meant explanations she couldn't give without compromising the federal investigation. Staying here meant accepting protection from a man who was either her best hope or her worst mistake. She showered and dressed in her own clothes, black pants with an elastic panel she'd secretly added, a loose blouse that skimmed her figure, one of her structured blazers. The armor of professionalism. When she looked in the mirror, she saw the same woman who'd walked into DeSantis Import Group 2 weeks ago, confident and controlled. The reflection was a lie now, but it was a necessary one. She found Luca in what appeared to be a home office, though calling it that felt inadequate. The room was lined with bookshelves holding leather-bound volumes in multiple languages. The desk was antique mahogany that probably cost more than Evelyn's annual salary, and the technology was cutting edge, multiple monitors displaying financial data, security feeds, and what looked like real-time tracking of shipping containers somewhere in the Atlantic. He looked up when she entered, his eyes sharp despite the early hour. He'd clearly been awake for some time, his shirt already crisp, his hair still damp from a recent shower. "Did you sleep?" he asked. "Enough." Evelyn remained standing, maintaining distance. "We need to talk about next steps." "Agreed." But first, I need you to understand what you're walking into. He gestured to one of the monitors. The Volkovs aren't just watching you anymore. They made contact last night. Evelyn felt her stomach drop. What kind of contact? The kind that comes with explicit threats and unreasonable demands. They want access to my distribution network. They want partnership in my legitimate operations. And they want assurance that whatever you find in your audit won't interfere with their plans. And if you refuse, then they'll eliminate obstacles. Starting with the federal auditor who's digging into financial records, they'd prefer stayed buried. He met her eyes. You specifically, Ms. Moore. They mentioned you by name. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Evelyn gripped the back of a chair, forcing herself to stay upright. How do they even know who I am? Because someone told them. Someone with access to the federal investigation. Luca's voice was grim. Which means the leak is deeper than I thought. Evelyn processed this, her analytical mind cutting through fear to find the patterns. If there's a leak in the prosecution, that means they know everything I've reported, every finding, every document I've requested. Yes. Then they know I haven't found anything incriminating yet, which means they're not worried about what I've already discovered. They're worried about what I might discover next. Luca's expression shifted to something that might have been respect. You're quick. I'm good at my job. Evelyn moved to the desk, studying the monitors. Show me what they're actually afraid of. Show me what you've been hiding. He hesitated, his hand hovering over the keyboard. Once I show you this, there's no going back. You'll know things that make you even more valuable to them, more dangerous to protect. I'm already in danger. At least let me understand why. Luca made a decision. He pulled up a file directory that looked nothing like the clean, organized structure of DeSantis Import Group's official records. This was chaotic, coded, deliberately obscure. He navigated through layers of encryption before opening a spreadsheet that made Evelyn's breath catch. My uncle ran a different kind of business, Luca said quietly. Import was always the cover. The real money came from facilitating transactions for people who couldn't use traditional banking. Not drugs. He had principles about that. But weapons, stolen art, cash that needed to move between continents without triggering international financial reporting. Evelyn stared at the numbers, her professional eye immediately recognizing the structure. Money laundering, on a massive scale. For 15 years, he built relationships with organizations across Europe, Asia, the Middle East. When he died, I inherited not just the business but the obligations. The expectations. Luca's jaw tightened. And the danger of trying to walk away from people who don't accept refusal. So you've been unwinding it, closing accounts, severing relationships. While trying not to get killed in the process, some of the organizations understood. Others saw it as betrayal. He pulled up another document, this one showing a timeline of incidents, robberies that looked like accidents, fires that destroyed warehouses, competitors who'd suddenly faced regulatory scrutiny. The Volkovs are the latest, and the most aggressive. Evelyn sat down, her mind racing through implications. The prosecutors don't know about this history. They're looking at current transactions and seeing patterns that match organized crime, but they don't realize you're dismantling it. If I tell them the truth, I incriminate myself in 15 years of federal crimes. If I stay silent, they assume continuity and build a case that sends me to prison anyway. His voice was level, but she heard the exhaustion beneath it. I've been walking a tightrope for 10 years, trying to find a way out that doesn't end with death or incarceration. Why tell me this now? Because you asked, and because if something happens to me, someone needs to understand what's actually at stake here. The Volkovs don't just want my business. They want the infrastructure my uncle built. The relationships, the roots, the systems for moving illegal money. If they get it, they'll undo everything I've worked to dismantle. Evelyn studied his face, looking for deception and finding only grim honesty. You're asking me to help you, not just to audit your books, but to find a way to document the cleanup without exposing the original crime. I'm asking you to do what you do best. Find the truth in the numbers. Then we figure out together what to do with it. It was insane, unethical, possibly illegal. Everything Evelyn had built her career on was about exposing deception, not concealing it. But she was also smart enough to recognize nuance, to understand that sometimes the path to justice wasn't straightforward. "I need access to everything," she said finally. "The real books. All of them. Every transaction your uncle ever made, every account you've closed, every relationship you've severed. Complete transparency. You'll have it. And I need to understand the Volkov situation, who they are, what they want, how they operate. I can't protect myself if I don't understand the threat." Luca nodded slowly. "I'll arrange a briefing with my security team." But Evelyn, he used her first name for the first time, and something about the intimacy of it made her pulse quicken. "Once you know all of this, you become complicit. If the prosecutors find out you had this information and didn't report it, your career is over, possibly worse. My career is already over the moment the Volkovs decide I'm more useful dead than alive." Evelyn stood, steadying herself against the desk. "I'm making a calculated risk. Help me survive long enough to finish the audit, and I'll find a way to document the truth that doesn't destroy you in the process. That's the best I can offer." "It's more than I expected." He stood as well, moving closer but maintaining respectful distance. "There's something else you should know." "Of course there is. The baby. You're going to start showing soon, no matter how carefully you dress. When that happens, the Volkovs will see it. They'll see vulnerability, a leverage point." Evelyn's hand moved to her stomach protectively. "I can handle myself." "I don't doubt that. But you can't handle yourself against professional criminals who see a pregnant woman as an easy target." His voice gentled. "I'm not trying to control you. I'm trying to keep you alive. There's a difference." She wanted to argue, to insist on her independence and capability, but the baby chose that moment to kick, a firm jab against her palm that reminded her this wasn't just about her anymore. "What are you suggesting?" she asked carefully. "That you stay here, not as a prisoner, but as a protected guest. You continue the audit. I'll have everything you need brought here. You work whatever hours you want, document whatever you find. But you do it from behind security that the Volkovs can't easily breach." "For how long?" "Until we resolve this, one way or another." Evelyn walked to the window, looking out at gardens that seemed designed to create an illusion of peace. "I've spent my entire life maintaining independence, making my own decisions, not relying on anyone." "I know. This baby wasn't planned. The father wanted nothing to do with it. I decided to handle it alone because that's what I do. I handle things." "I know that too." She turned to face him. "So you understand why accepting protection from you feels like failure." Luca crossed the distance between them, stopping just close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "It's not failure, it's adaptation. You're an accountant, Evelyn. You understand that sometimes the variables change and you have to recalculate. This is just a different equation, with much higher stakes. Yes, but also with resources you didn't have before." He held her gaze. "I'm not asking you to trust me blindly. I'm asking you to let me help you survive long enough to make your own choices about what comes next. After that, if you want to walk away, I won't stop you." It was a reasonable offer, more than reasonable, considering the circumstances. And yet something about it terrified her more than the danger itself. The possibility of becoming dependent, of needing someone, of letting down the walls she'd built so carefully. The baby kicked again, harder this time. Evelyn pressed her hand against the spot, feeling the life inside her demanding consideration. "I'll stay," she said quietly. "But I continue working. I maintain my own conclusions about the audit, and when this is over, we go back to being auditor and subject. Nothing more." "Agreed." "And Luca?" She used his first name deliberately, meeting his intensity with her own. "If you're playing me, if any of this is manipulation designed to compromise the investigation, I will find a way to make you regret it, pregnant or not, protected or not. I don't forgive betrayal." Something flickered in his expression, recognition, perhaps, of a kindred spirit. "Neither do I, Evelyn, which is why I'm trusting you with information that could destroy me. We're both taking risks here." She nodded, acknowledging the truth of it. They stood there for a moment, adversaries bound by circumstance, neither quite willing to look away first. Maria appeared in the doorway, breaking the tension. "Mr. DeSantis, Your 10 o'clock is here. Thank you, Maria. Luca stepped back, professional distance reasserting itself. Evelyn, I'll have the files you requested transferred to a secure system you can access from the library. It's quieter there. Better for concentration. Fine. He moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. Dr. Chen is coming this afternoon. She's an obstetrician, discreet. She'll check on you and the baby, make sure everything is progressing normally after yesterday's stress. Evelyn started to protest, then stopped. She'd been avoiding proper prenatal care, telling herself she'd catch up later, that she was healthy enough to manage with minimal intervention. But yesterday had been traumatic, and she'd felt the baby's increased movement, the physical response to her fear. What time? She asked. 3 o'clock. Maria will bring her to the library. After he left, Evelyn stood alone in the office, surrounded by monitors displaying the infrastructure of a criminal empire being slowly dismantled. She thought about the choices that had brought her here, the assignment she'd accepted without question, the pregnancy she'd hidden with such determination, the independence she'd valued above all else. All of it had led to this moment, standing in a mansion owned by a man who was either saving her life or ruining it, carrying a child she'd planned to raise alone while accepting protection she'd sworn never to need. The irony was almost painful. She found the library exactly where Maria said it would be, a 2-story room lined with books in multiple languages, comfortable leather chairs positioned near windows that overlooked gardens, now patrolled by men with concealed weapons. Someone had set up a workstation for her, large desk, multiple monitors, ergonomic chair that adjusted for comfort. The files Luca had promised were already loaded, thousands of documents spanning 15 years of financial crime and careful extraction. Evelyn sat down and began reading, her analytical mind categorizing and connecting with the focused intensity that had made her reputation. By noon, she'd identified the structure. By 2, she'd mapped the key relationships. By the time Dr. Chen arrived, a woman in her 50s with gentle hands and a kind smile, Evelyn had begun to understand not just what Luca's uncle had built, but how brilliantly Luca had been dismantling it without triggering catastrophic retaliation. "How are you feeling?" Dr. Chen asked, setting up portable monitoring equipment with practiced efficiency. "Tired, stressed, probably not ideal for pregnancy." "No, but manageable if we're careful. Let's see how the baby is doing." Evelyn lay back on the leather couch while Dr. Chen performed an examination that was thorough without being invasive. The sound of the baby's heartbeat filled the library, strong, steady, impossibly real. "Everything looks good," Dr. Chen said, wiping gel from Evelyn's stomach. "Heart rate is perfect. Movement is active. You're measuring right on schedule for 22 weeks. No damage from yesterday? None that I can detect, but you need to reduce stress as much as possible. High cortisol levels aren't good for fetal development." She paused. "Mr. DeSantis explained your situation. I want you to know that I've worked with him for years. He takes protection seriously. You're as safe here as anywhere." Evelyn sat up, adjusting her blouse. "How many other women has he protected?" "In my time, 3. All different circumstances. All survived and went on to live normal lives." Dr. Chen's eyes were steady. "He has a code. He doesn't abandon people who need help. Even when helping them is dangerous? Especially then." After Dr. Chen left, Evelyn returned to the files, but her concentration was fractured. She kept thinking about what the doctor had said. 3 other women, all protected, all survived. It suggested a pattern, a history of Luca choosing danger in service of something that looked almost like morality. She was still working when Luca appeared in the doorway near 7. His tie loosened, exhaustion evident in the set of his shoulders. "You should eat," he said. "I should finish this analysis." "Evelyn," he crossed to the desk, studying the screens over her shoulder. "What did you find?" "Brilliance, actually." She pulled up a spreadsheet showing transaction patterns. "Your uncle was a genius at building parallel systems, and you've been equally genius at collapsing them without leaving evidence that could be used against you. Every account closure looks like normal business evolution. Every severed relationship appears mutual. If I didn't know what to look for, I'd never see the crime beneath the cleanup." "Is that admiration I hear?" "Professional respect for skilled work. Don't let it go to your head." She zoomed in on a cluster of transactions. "But there's a problem. These accounts, the ones you haven't closed yet, The Volkovs are right to be interested. If they get access to these relationships, they'll have exactly what they need to rebuild everything you've been tearing down. Luca leaned closer, his hand bracing against the desk near hers. She could smell his cologne, subtle, expensive, distracting. Can you help me close them without triggering alarms? Possibly, but it'll take time and coordination with people who might not want to cooperate. How much time? 4 weeks, maybe 6 if complications arise. He was quiet for a moment, calculating. The baby. When will you start showing, obviously? Evelyn's hand moved to her stomach. Soon. I can probably maintain the illusion another 3 weeks with the right clothes. After that, it won't matter what I wear. Then we work fast. Close the accounts, document everything, give you evidence that shows legitimate business evolution rather than criminal dismantling. Then we figure out how to handle the Volkovs. They're not going to just accept refusal. No. But if we can remove their leverage, eliminate the infrastructure they want, they'll move on to easier targets. His eyes met hers. It's not a perfect solution, but it's the best option we have. Evelyn knew he was right. She also knew that 4 to 6 weeks living in close proximity to Luca DeSantis, working together toward shared goals, was exactly the kind of situation that blurred boundaries and created complications she couldn't afford. But the alternative was dying, or watching him die, or bringing a child into a world where her mother was constantly looking over her shoulder, waiting for threats that never quite materialized, but never quite disappeared either. I'll need direct communication with your international contacts, she said, an authority to make decisions about account closures without running everything past you first. I work faster when I don't have to wait for approvals. You'll have it. And I want regular updates on the security situation. No surprises. No protecting me from information I need to make informed decisions. Agreed. She stood, facing him across the desk. This is a partnership, Luca. Temporary, focused, purely professional. When it's over, we go our separate ways. Clear? Perfectly clear? But something in his eyes suggested he wasn't entirely certain it would be that simple. Neither was she. The next 3 weeks developed a rhythm that felt both sustainable and dangerous. Evelyn worked 16-hour days, systematically dismantling the financial infrastructure that had sustained criminal operations for 15 years. Luca coordinated with contacts across 3 continents, smoothing transitions and managing relationships with the careful diplomacy of someone who understood that wounded pride could be as deadly as active hostility. They ate dinner together most evenings, working meals where conversation stayed focused on transactions and strategy. Maria brought food that Evelyn actually wanted to eat. Apparently, Luca had noticed her preferences and communicated them, and the baby seemed to approve, settling into more regular patterns of movement. Dr. Chen visited weekly, monitoring the pregnancy with increasing satisfaction. You're healthier now than when I first examined you, she said during the 3rd visit. Less stress, better nutrition, regular sleep. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Evelyn didn't mention that what she was doing was accepting help from a man she'd been hired to investigate, or that she'd begun to look forward to their evening working sessions with an anticipation that had nothing to do with the audit. The attraction was undeniable. She'd have to be dead not to notice the way Luca moved, the intelligence in his eyes when he worked through complex problems, the unexpected gentleness he showed when he thought she wasn't looking. She'd catch him watching her sometimes, his gaze lingering on her face or dropping to where her hand rested on her growing stomach. They never discussed it, never acknowledged the tension that built each time they worked late into the night, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his body, aware of every accidental touch. Evelyn told herself it was just proximity and circumstance, forced intimacy creating false connection. When this was over, when she returned to her regular life, the attraction would fade like a fever dream. She almost believed it. On the 21st day, everything changed. Evelyn was in the library reviewing closure documents when Luca appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. We have a problem. She looked up from her laptop. What kind of problem? The kind where the Volkovs just made it clear they're done waiting. He crossed to her desk, setting down his phone to show her a text message. The words were simple, brutal. The auditor is the leverage. Use her or lose her. You have 48 hours. Evelyn's blood went cold. They're going to come after me directly. Yes. Which means we need to accelerate everything. The account closures, the documentation, all of it. We don't have 6 weeks anymore. We have 2 days. She stared at him, her mind racing through implications. That's impossible. Some of these accounts require international coordination, legal reviews, transfer protocols. Then we cut corners, take risks, do whatever it takes. His voice was fierce. I am not letting them use you as leverage. I don't care what it costs. Evelyn stood, facing him across the desk. Her hand moved to her stomach where the baby was kicking with unusual vigor, as though sensing her fear. If we rush this, we could make mistakes, leave evidence, trigger exactly the kind of scrutiny you've been avoiding. Better scrutiny than having you kidnapped or killed. Is it? If they can't use me as leverage against you, they'll just eliminate me as a liability. Either way, I'm a target. Luca moved around the desk, closing the distance between them. Then we change the equation. We give them something else to focus on. Like what? His eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Me. We make it clear that threatening you means war. Complete, unequivocal, no-holds-barred war. Make the cost so high that even the Volkovs will back down. That's insane. You're talking about starting a gang war. I'm talking about protecting you. His hand came up, almost touching her face before he caught himself and pulled back. I know we agreed this was temporary, professional, that we'd go our separate ways when it was over. But Evelyn, I can't... He stopped, clearly struggling with something. I can't lose you. Not to them, not to anyone. The confession hung between them, raw and unexpected. Evelyn felt her carefully maintained walls crack, felt something deep inside her respond to the fierce protectiveness in his voice. This isn't about me, she said quietly. This is about you trying to be different from your uncle, trying to prove you can protect people instead of exploiting them. Maybe, but that doesn't make it less true. He held her gaze. Tell me you feel nothing. Tell me these past 3 weeks have been purely professional, and I'll believe you. But don't tell me I'm alone in this. Evelyn knew she should lie, should maintain the boundaries that kept her safe. But she was so tired of lying, of hiding, of pretending she didn't need anything or anyone. You're not alone, she whispered. Luca's eyes darkened. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel his breath on her face. Then let me protect you. Not because you need it, but because I need to do this. Because the thought of them touching you makes me want to burn down everything I've built. She should pull away. Should remind him that she was pregnant with another man's child, that this situation was temporary, that mixing personal feelings with professional necessity was exactly the kind of mistake that destroyed lives. Instead, she reached up and touched his face, feeling the rough stubble along his jaw, the warmth of his skin. What are you proposing? That we stop pretending this is just about the audit, that we acknowledge what's happening between us and use it. Let the Volkovs see that you're not just a liability or leverage, you're mine, and I protect what's mine with everything I have. The possessiveness should have angered her. Instead, it sent heat spiraling through her body, a response she hadn't felt in months. I'm not yours, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Aren't you? His hand came up to cover hers where it rested against his face. You're living in my house, trusting me with your life, letting me see parts of yourself you show no one else. If that's not belonging, what is it? Evelyn felt the last of her resistance crumble. This is a terrible idea. Probably the worst I've ever had. I'm pregnant with someone else's child. I know. This won't last. When the danger is over, we'll deal with that when it comes. He leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching hers. Right now, in this moment, tell me what you want. What she wanted was impossible and terrifying and completely irresponsible. She wanted to stop being afraid, stop being alone, stop carrying everything by herself. She wanted him. Kiss me, she breathed. Luca didn't hesitate. His mouth found hers with a hunger that matched her own, fierce and desperate and achingly gentle all at once. Evelyn melted into him, her hands gripping his shoulders, her body responding with an intensity that pregnancy had only amplified. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she saw the same shock in his eyes that she felt. This wasn't just attraction. It was something bigger, more dangerous. Something that could save them or destroy them completely. The kiss changed everything and nothing at all. Evelyn pulled back first, her hand still resting against Luca's chest where she could feel his heart hammering as hard as her own. The rational part of her brain was screaming warnings about complications and consequences, but her body was singing with a different kind of awareness entirely. "We can't," she said, though she made no move to step away. This is exactly the kind of mistake that ruins everything. Luca's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. Or it's the thing that finally makes sense of all this chaos. You're romanticizing a crisis situation. Proximity and danger create false intimacy. It's basic psychology. Is that what you tell yourself? His eyes searched hers. That what you're feeling isn't real? Just a stress response? Evelyn wanted to say yes, to retreat behind logic and self-protection. But she'd built her career on honesty with numbers, on refusing to manipulate data to support false narratives. She couldn't start lying now, not about something this important. "I don't know what I'm feeling," she admitted quietly. "Everything is too complicated. The baby, the danger, this impossible situation. I can't tell what's real and what's just survival instinct." Luca nodded slowly, his hand dropping from her face, though he didn't move away. "Then we table it. Focus on keeping you alive for the next 48 hours. After that, when the immediate threat is handled, we figure out the rest. And if there is no after, if the Volkovs don't back down, then I make sure you and the baby get somewhere safe, even if I don't." His voice was matter-of-fact, as though he'd already calculated the probability and accepted the outcome. "I have resources, identities prepared, money in accounts that can't be traced. You could disappear completely if you needed to." The casual way he discussed his own potential death made Evelyn's chest tighten. That's not a solution. That's just transferring the problem. It's the best option if everything else fails. He stepped back, professional distance reasserting itself, though his eyes still held heat. "But I'm not planning to fail. Which means we need to move fast on the account closures and prepare for the Volkov's next move." Evelyn forced her mind back into analytical mode, pushing aside the emotional chaos to focus on concrete problems with concrete solutions. "Show me their message again." Luca handed her his phone. She read the text 3 times, parsing the language for subtext and implications. "They're giving you an ultimatum, but they're not specifying terms. That's deliberate. They want you desperate enough to make mistakes." "Agreed, which is why we're not going to give them the satisfaction." He moved to the desk, pulling up security feeds on her laptop. "I've been tracking their movements for the past week. They have people watching the estate, rotating shifts every 6 hours. Professional surveillance, but not an assault team. They're still in the intimidation phase." "How long until that changes?" "Unknown, but the 48-hour deadline suggests they're planning something specific. Either they move against us directly, or they apply pressure through another vector." Evelyn studied the security feeds, her accountant's brain identifying patterns in the surveillance rotation. "They're watching the main gate and the service entrance. What about the perimeter?" "Monitored, but it's 3 acres of property. Impossible to watch every point simultaneously." Luca zoomed in on the eastern boundary where woods pressed close to the estate walls. If they wanted to breach, that would be the logical entry point. Then that's where you reinforce security. Already done. But reinforcement takes bodies, and bodies cost money and loyalty. The more people I bring in, the higher the chance of someone being compromised. It was the eternal problem of protection. Every layer of security introduced new vulnerabilities. Evelyn understood it instinctively, the same way she understood that complex financial structures created opportunities for both fraud and discovery. "What about going on offense?" she asked. "Instead of waiting for them to move, we make the first strike." Luca looked at her with surprise and something that might have been approval. "Explain." "They want the infrastructure your uncle built, the relationships and distribution channels. But what if those relationships no longer exist? What if we don't just close the accounts, but we burn the bridges completely? Make it clear to every contact that working with the Volkovs means permanent severance from your network. That would require revealing information I've kept hidden for years, exposing relationships I've tried to protect. But it would eliminate their leverage. If there's nothing left to take, they have no reason to keep pushing." Evelyn pulled up her analysis of the remaining active accounts. These 5 contacts are the critical ones, the ones with reach and resources. If we close them publicly, make a statement that you're completely out of the old business, the Volkovs lose their primary objective. Luka studied the list, his expression unreadable. Those 5 represent 30 years of my family's work. Burning those bridges means burning my uncle's legacy completely. Is that legacy worth dying for? The question hung between them. Evelyn watched him wrestle with it, saw the conflict between family loyalty and survival play out across his features. She understood the weight of it. She'd made her own difficult choice about family when she'd decided to have this baby alone rather than involve the father or her distant relatives. Sometimes protecting yourself meant letting go of everything you thought defined you. Do it, Luka said finally. Draft the communications. I'll make the calls personally. We'll have everything closed by midnight tomorrow. That's aggressive. Some of these people won't respond well to being cut off abruptly. Then they'll be angry, but they'll be angry at me, not at you, which is exactly what we need. He met her eyes. The Volkovs want leverage. We're going to prove you're not a weakness they can exploit. You're a partner with your own strength and value. Evelyn felt something warm unfold in her chest at the word partner. It suggested equality, respect, choice, everything she'd been denied in the relationship that had resulted in this pregnancy. I'll need complete authority to speak on your behalf for the financial closures, she said. No second guessing, no interference. You have it. And I want access to your security planning. If things go wrong, I need to know the extraction protocols. Luka hesitated. Evelyn, if things go that wrong, the extraction protocol is for you and the baby only. I won't be part of it. That's unacceptable. That's reality. His voice was gentle but firm. I'm not going to risk you trying to save me if the situation deteriorates. The whole point of this is keeping you safe. And what if I'm not willing to accept being saved while you die? The words came out sharper than she intended, edged with a fear she didn't want to acknowledge. What if I refuse to run? Then I'll have Maria sedate you and carry you to the car myself. He said it lightly, but she heard the steel beneath. I know you're strong, Evelyn. I know you're capable, but this isn't about capability. This is about making sure that baby gets a chance to be born. Everything else is secondary. The baby kicked hard against Evelyn's ribs, as though protesting the entire conversation. She pressed her hand against the spot, feeling the life inside her demand consideration. 23 weeks now. Viable in another month if emergency delivery became necessary, but still so vulnerable, so dependent on her body's ability to sustain it. Luka's eyes dropped to where her hand rested. When are you due? He asked quietly. Early June, assuming everything goes normally. And the father? Evelyn tensed. They hadn't discussed this directly, had both carefully avoided the subject, even as it became increasingly obvious. Uninvolved by choice, his and mine. This baby is mine alone. Does he know about the danger you're in? No, and I'm not telling him. He made it clear he wanted no part of this pregnancy. I'm not going to suddenly involve him just because the situation got complicated. Luka was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. You're planning to raise the baby by yourself. No family support, no partner. That was always the plan. And after? When the audit is finished and the danger is past? What then? Evelyn had been avoiding thinking about after with any specificity, as though not planning might somehow keep her options open. I return to my apartment, take maternity leave, find childcare, go back to work when I'm ready, live my life. Alone. By choice. I don't need a partner to be a good parent. I'm not suggesting you do. Luka moved closer again, invading her space in a way that should have felt threatening but instead felt grounding. I'm asking if that's still what you want, after everything that's happened, after this. He gestured between them, encompassing the kiss, the past 3 weeks, the impossible situation that had thrown them together. Evelyn felt her carefully constructed plans begin to crack, felt the possibility of something different trying to take root. I don't know, she admitted. I don't know what I want anymore beyond survival. Then we focus on survival. And when we're on the other side of this, you can figure out the rest. He touched her face again, a brief caress that sent heat spiraling through her. But Evelyn, Whatever you decide about the future, know that I'm not going anywhere unless you tell me to leave. This isn't just about protection anymore. At least not for me." Before she could respond, before she could process what he was offering, Maria appeared in the doorway with unusual urgency. "Mr. DeSantis, you need to see this." They followed her to the security office where multiple monitors displayed feeds from cameras positioned around the estate. On the main screen, a convoy of black vehicles was approaching the gate, 3 SUVs moving with the coordinated precision of a military operation. "The Volkovs?" Evelyn asked, though she already knew the answer. "Yes." Luca's voice was ice cold. 48 hours, they said. They're early." The lead vehicle stopped at the gate. A man got out, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing an expensive suit that didn't quite conceal the weapon at his hip. He looked directly at the security camera and smiled. "He wants us to know he's here," Luca said. "This is a show of force, intimidation." "Is it working? On you? I hope not." "On me? Absolutely." He pulled out his phone, dialing quickly. "Victor, I need the response team at the gate, full protocols, and get everyone else to defensive positions, now." The security feed showed his people moving with practiced efficiency, taking up positions that transformed the estate from elegant home to fortified position in under 3 minutes. Evelyn watched with a sick feeling in her stomach as the reality of the situation became undeniable. This wasn't an accounting problem she could solve with analysis and documentation. This was violence waiting to happen, men with guns prepared to kill for territory and pride. The man at the gate pulled out a phone. Seconds later, Luca's phone rang. He answered on speaker so Evelyn could hear. "Volkov. DeSantis." The voice was heavily accented, Russian inflections making the syllables sharp. "We need to talk about our mutual interests." "We have no mutual interests. I've made that clear." "Then perhaps we discuss the accountant you're protecting, the pregnant one who's been digging through your financial records. Very interesting situation." Evelyn felt her blood turn to ice. They knew. They knew everything. Luca's hand found hers, squeezed once in silent reassurance. "Miss Moore is conducting a legitimate audit. Her work has nothing to do with you." "Doesn't it? She's found things. Interesting things about your uncle's old business. Things we'd very much like to discuss with her, privately." "That's not going to happen." "Then perhaps we should discuss what happens when people refuse our reasonable requests." The threat was barely veiled. "You've built something impressive here, DeSantis. Would be shame to see it destroyed over one stubborn accountant and her unfortunate pregnancy." The casual cruelty in his voice made Evelyn's hands shake. Luca saw it, pulled her closer against his side. "You have 10 seconds to leave my property," Luca said, his voice deadly calm. "After that, I stop being polite." Such threats. "We're simply here to negotiate. 9, 8, 7. You're making a mistake, DeSantis. We have reach you can't imagine, resources, friends in places you think are safe. 4, 3. We know where she lives, where she worked, every person she's ever contacted. You cannot protect her from everyone. 2, 1. Luca disconnected the call and nodded to someone off screen. The security monitors showed what happened next with brutal efficiency. Warning shots, controlled bursts from trained shooters positioned on the estate walls. The rounds hit the ground in front of the Volkov vehicles, close enough to demonstrate accuracy, but far enough to avoid immediate escalation. The man at the gate stopped smiling. He spoke into his phone, gestured sharply to his people. The vehicles reversed in coordinated formation, maintaining visual contact with the estate as they withdrew down the long driveway. But they didn't leave entirely. They parked just beyond the property line, making it clear this was a tactical retreat, not a surrender. "They'll be back," Luca said quietly, "and next time they won't announce themselves." Evelyn felt the baby kick again, harder now, as though responding to her spiking anxiety. "How long do we have?" "Hours, maybe less." He turned to face her, his hands gripping her shoulders. "I need you to listen to me very carefully. There's a safe room in the basement. Reinforced steel, independent air supply, communication equipment. If they breach the main house, you go there immediately. Don't wait for me. Don't try to help. You lock yourself in, and you wait for the extraction team. And you? I'll buy you time, whatever it takes. That's not a plan, that's a suicide mission. It's the only plan that guarantees your safety. His eyes were fierce, desperate. Evelyn, please, don't fight me on this. I need to know you'll protect yourself and the baby, even if it means leaving me behind. She wanted to argue, to insist there had to be another way. But she'd spent her career analyzing risk and probability. She knew the numbers, knew the likely outcomes. This was going to end badly for someone. The only question was who. Show me the safe room, she said finally, and the extraction protocols. If I'm going to survive this, I need to understand every contingency. Relief flickered across his face. Thank you. He led her through the mansion to a basement level she hadn't known existed. The safe room was exactly as he'd described, a vault-like space with provisions, medical supplies, weapons, and communication equipment that could reach law enforcement or private security anywhere in the world. There's a tunnel, Luca explained, pointing to a concealed panel in the floor. It runs 300 yards to an exit point beyond the estate walls. A car will be waiting there, driver already in position. He'll take you to a private airfield. From there, you fly to a safe house in Montana. New identity documents are in the red folder, cash in the safe. Everything you need to disappear completely. Evelyn stared at the preparations that must have taken months to arrange. You've been planning this for a while. Since the day you walked into my building, I saw the vulnerability, the pregnancy you were trying to hide, and I knew that if the Volkovs learned about you, this moment was inevitable. So you've been protecting me from the beginning, even before I knew I needed protection. Yes. She should have been angry at the presumption, the manipulation of keeping her in the dark. Instead, she felt something else, a strange mixture of gratitude and grief. He'd been preparing to save her life while accepting his own death as the probable cost. I won't use this, she said quietly. I won't run while you die. You will if it comes to that, because you're not just responsible for yourself anymore. He placed his hand over hers where it rested on her stomach. This baby deserves a chance. Don't take that away because of pride or misplaced loyalty. The baby kicked against their joined hands, a flutter of movement that felt like agreement. Evelyn closed her eyes, fighting tears she refused to shed. I hate this, she whispered. I hate all of it. I know. Luca pulled her into his arms, holding her with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the violence waiting outside. But we're going to get through it. One way or another, you're going to survive this. They stood there in the basement bunker, surrounded by preparations for disaster, holding on to each other like drowning people clutching wreckage. Evelyn breathed in his scent, memorized the feeling of his arms around her, allowed herself this one moment of weakness. Then she pulled back, wiped her eyes, and straightened her spine. What's the timeline for the account closures? Luca blinked at the subject change, then smiled slightly. Ever the professional. If I'm going to help you survive this, I need to eliminate their leverage, which means we work, now. They returned to the library where Evelyn's analysis waited. For the next 6 hours, they worked with single-minded focus, making calls across time zones, drafting communications, systematically dismantling the infrastructure that had sustained criminal operations for 30 years. Some contacts understood. Others were angry, offended, threatening. Luca handled each conversation with the same calm authority, making it clear that this wasn't a negotiation. The old business was over. Anyone who couldn't accept that would face him as an enemy rather than an ally. By midnight, 4 of the 5 critical accounts were closed. The last one, a shipping contact in Naples with deep family connections, proved more difficult. He won't take my call, Luca said, setting down his phone in frustration. He's angry about being cut off without warning, says it's disrespectful to 30 years of relationship. Then I'll call him. Evelyn pulled up the contact information. What's his name? Vincenzo Caruso. But Evelyn, he's old school. He won't respond well to a woman? A pregnant accountant explaining business realities? She was already dialing. Trust me. The call connected after 4 rings. A gravelly voice answered in Italian. Evelyn responded in the same language, functional rather than fluent, but good enough for basic business communication. Mr. Caruso, my name is Evelyn Moore. I'm the forensic accountant conducting an audit of Mr. DeSantis's operations. I need to speak with you about the closure of your business relationship. There was a long pause. You speak Italian? Poorly, but yes, I understand you're upset about the abrupt termination of services. Upset? I am insulted, disrespected. After 30 years of loyalty, I understand, and in different circumstances, this would have been handled with more care. But circumstances are not different. They're dangerous. And your relationship with Mr. DeSantis has become a liability that puts both of you at risk. Another pause. Explain. There are people who want to use your shipping routes for purposes you would not approve. People who don't respect the boundaries that made your relationship with the DeSantis family sustainable. If those people gain access to your operations through any association with Luca, you become their target as well as their resource. She heard him breathing, considering. These people, they are Russian? Yes. I do not work with Russians. They have no honor. Exactly. Which is why Luca is closing all connections that could be exploited, not because he doesn't value the relationship, but because he's trying to protect everyone involved from a threat that doesn't understand mutual respect. And you, the pregnant accountant, you understand these things? Evelyn placed her hand on her stomach where the baby had started moving again. I understand that sometimes protecting people you care about means cutting ties you value, even when it hurts, even when it seems disrespectful, because the alternative is watching them suffer consequences they don't deserve. Caruso made a sound that might have been approval. You are wasted on accounting, girl. You should be in diplomacy. I'll take that as a compliment. So will you accept the closure? Allow Luca to protect your operations by severing the connection completely? Tell him he owes me a very good bottle of wine, and if he ever needs legitimate shipping, truly legitimate, he knows where to find me. I'll tell him. Thank you, Mr. Caruso. She disconnected and looked up to find Luca staring at her with undisguised admiration. You just handled in 5 minutes what I couldn't manage in 2 hours. You were approaching it wrong. He wasn't angry about losing business. He was angry about losing face. I gave him a reason that protected his pride while accepting your decision. Where did you learn Italian? College minor. I've forgotten most of it, but business vocabulary sticks. She pulled up her spreadsheet, updating the final account status. That's all 5. The infrastructure is gone. The Volkovs have nothing left to take. Luca sat back in his chair, something like relief crossing his features. Then we've removed their primary leverage, which makes us more dangerous to them, not less. Now we're just obstacles to be eliminated rather than assets to be acquired. True. But it also removes their justification. They can't claim business interest anymore. Anything they do now is purely aggression, which gives us options for response. Evelyn checked the time. Nearly 1 in the morning. Exhaustion was making her thoughts sluggish, but the baby was wide awake, moving with increasing vigor. She pressed her hand against the spot where tiny feet seemed to be practicing kickboxing against her ribs. Are you in pain? Luca asked, noticing her wince. Just active, baby. It's normal. She tried to shift into a more comfortable position, but the ergonomic chair didn't quite accommodate her changing body. I should probably try to sleep. Tomorrow is going to be complicated. Stay here. He stood, moving to a cabinet against the wall. I'll bring you something. He returned with pillows and a soft blanket, arranging them on the leather couch with surprising tenderness. Lie down. Try to rest. I can walk upstairs to the guest room. I know you can, but I'd prefer you stay close, just in case. His eyes held worry he wasn't quite concealing. Please. Evelyn was too tired to argue. She settled onto the couch, the pillows supporting her in ways that eased the constant pressure on her back. Luca draped the blanket over her, his hand lingering on her shoulder for a moment. You did incredible work tonight, he said quietly. Most people would have frozen, panicked, but you solved problems, made impossible situations work. It's what I do. Numbers, people, conflicts, they're all just puzzles to solve. Is that what I am to you? A puzzle? Evelyn met his eyes, seeing vulnerability beneath the surface control. No, you're something much more complicated. Good or bad complicated? I don't know yet. Ask me again when we're not facing imminent death. He smiled, a genuine expression that softened his features and made him look younger. Deal. Now sleep. I'll be right here working. If anything changes, I'll wake you." She wanted to protest, to insist she could stay awake and help, but her body had other ideas. The baby settled as soon as she lay still, and exhaustion pulled her under with surprising speed. She woke hours later to find pale dawn light filtering through the library windows, and Luca exactly where he'd promised to be, sitting at the desk, monitoring security feeds, his attention focused and unwavering. "Anything happen?" she asked, her voice rough from sleep. He looked over, relief flickering across his face. "You're awake." "No, nothing. The Volkovs are still parked beyond the property line, but they haven't made another move." "How long have you been up?" "I didn't sleep." Evelyn sat up slowly, her body stiff from the unfamiliar position. "Luca, you need to rest. You're no good to anyone exhausted." "I'm fine. There's coffee if you want it. Decaf," he added before she could ask. And Maria left breakfast in the warming drawer. She accepted the coffee gratefully, holding the warm cup between her hands. The baby was quiet this morning, settled low and heavy. 23 weeks and 3 days, still so much time before this pregnancy reached anything close to safety. "What's the plan for today?" she asked. "We wait. See how the Volkovs respond to losing their leverage. If they're smart, they'll withdraw and find an easier target." He paused. "If they're not smart, things get messier." Define messy. "Assault on the estate. Attempt to breach security and take you by force. Possibly attempt to kill me and eliminate the obstacle entirely." The casual way he discussed his own murder made Evelyn's hands tighten around her cup. "We need a better plan than waiting to be attacked." "I'm open to suggestions." She thought about it, analyzing the situation the way she would a complex financial fraud. They want something. Even without the infrastructure, they still want something, or they would have already withdrawn. What is it? Luca considered this. Reputation. Face. They came here making demands and threats. If they back down now without getting anything, they look weak. Weak is fatal in their world. So we give them something. Not what they originally wanted, but something that lets them save face while achieving our goal of removing the threat. Like what? Information. Names of your uncle's other contacts. The ones you haven't worked with in years, but who might be useful to them. Not enough to rebuild the infrastructure, but enough to feel like they gained something from this confrontation. It was ethically questionable, potentially dangerous to people she'd never met. But Evelyn had learned over the past weeks that survival sometimes required difficult choices. Sometimes protecting yourself meant sacrificing someone else's comfort or convenience. Luca studied her face. "You'd be willing to do that? Compromise people you don't know to protect yourself?" "I'd be willing to make hard choices to protect my baby." "There's a difference." She met his eyes. "Those contacts chose to work in your uncle's world. They accepted those risks. I didn't. This baby didn't. We're not obligated to sacrifice ourselves for their convenience." "You sound like me. Like someone who's learned that morality gets complicated when survival is on the line." "Maybe I'm learning a lot of things I didn't expect to learn." Evelyn set down her coffee cup. "Will it work? Will they accept information as sufficient compensation?" "Possibly, if I present it correctly. Make them believe they're getting something valuable rather than just old names with limited utility." He pulled up a document on his laptop. "These contacts stopped being relevant 5 years ago when they moved into territories I wanted no part of. They're volatile, unpredictable, exactly the kind of people the Volkovs would struggle to work with successfully. But they don't need to know that. No, they just need to believe they've won something." They spent the next hour crafting the offer. Enough information to seem valuable, not enough to actually rebuild what Luca had dismantled. By 9 o'clock they were ready. Luca made the call himself, putting it on speaker so Evelyn could hear. The same Russian voice answered. "DeSantis, I'm surprised to hear from you so soon. I have a proposal, one that gives you what you want without requiring further confrontation." "I'm listening." "I'll provide you with contact information for 5 of my uncle's former associates, people with their own operations, their own resources, people who might be interested in the kind of partnership you're offering." There was a pause. "And in exchange?" "You leave. You stop watching my property. You forget about Ms. Moore and her audit. This matter between us is closed." These contacts, they are valuable? They were valuable enough for my uncle to maintain relationships with them for 20 years. Whether they're valuable to you depends on your ability to negotiate with people who don't respond well to threats. Another pause, longer this time. You think we cannot handle difficult people? I think you're smart enough to recognize an opportunity when it's offered, and pragmatic enough to accept a win that doesn't require bloodshed. Evelyn held her breath, waiting. The baby kicked once, a sharp jab that felt almost like encouragement. Send the information, the Russian said finally. We will verify it is legitimate. If we are satisfied, we leave. If not, we return to previous discussion about the accountant. Understood. You'll have it within the hour. Luca disconnected and immediately began preparing the document. His hands were steady, but Evelyn could see the tension in his shoulders, the tight set of his jaw. This might actually work, she said, or it might buy us a few hours before they realize the contacts are less useful than they appear. He hit send, the document disappearing into encrypted communication channels. Either way, we've bought time. And if they come back? Then we use the contingency plans, the safe room, the extraction, everything we discussed. He turned to face her. But Evelyn, I need you to promise me something. What? If it comes to that, if I tell you to run, you don't hesitate, you don't argue, you just go. For the baby, if not for yourself. She wanted to protest, to insist she wouldn't abandon him, but she felt the life moving inside her, felt the weight of responsibility that came with creating another human being. This baby deserved a chance, deserved a mother who chose survival over pride. I promise, she said quietly, but I'm going to spend every day after that finding a way to make sure you survive too. Fair enough. He crossed to her, pulled her to her feet, held her close enough that she could feel his heartbeat against her cheek. You know this is insane, right? Everything about this situation, you and me. The fact that I'm falling for a pregnant woman I'm supposed to be protecting from Russian gangsters while she audits my criminal empire. Evelyn's breath caught. You're falling for me? How could I not be? You're brilliant, fearless, stubborn as hell, and you look at me like I'm someone worth saving rather than someone worth destroying. His hand came up to cup her face. I know the timing is terrible. I know you're dealing with enough without me adding complications. But I need you to know. Before anything else happens, I need you to know that this isn't just about protection anymore. She should pull away, should remind him that she was pregnant with another man's child, that this whole situation was temporary, that feelings developed under crisis rarely survived normal circumstances. Instead, she kissed him, hard and deep and desperate, pouring everything she couldn't say into the contact. Luca responded instantly, his arms tightening around her, careful of her changing body but fierce in his intensity. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Evelyn pressed her forehead against his chest. This is the worst possible timing. Agreed. We barely know each other. Also true. I'm having another man's baby in 4 months. I'm aware. His hand splayed across her lower back, supporting and grounding. Does any of that change how you feel? Evelyn thought about it, really thought about it. The attraction was undeniable. The respect had grown over weeks of working together. But was there more? Was there something real beneath the crisis and proximity? The baby kicked again, and suddenly she understood. Yes, there was something real. Something that had been building since the moment Luca had looked at her pregnancy with knowledge and care rather than judgment. Something that had strengthened every time he'd chosen her safety over his own interests. No, she whispered. It doesn't change anything. His arms tightened around her. They stood there in the library, holding each other while danger waited outside and impossible futures beckoned. The moment felt stolen, fragile, desperately important. It ended when Luca's phone buzzed with an incoming message. He pulled it out, read it, and his expression shifted to something grim. They've verified the contacts. They're withdrawing. He showed her the screen. It worked. Evelyn felt relief flood through her so powerfully it made her knees weak. It's over? For now. They could still come back if the contacts don't pan out. But they're leaving the immediate area. He pulled up security feeds showing the black vehicles driving away, disappearing down the road that led back toward the city. You're safe. For today, at least. She should have felt triumphant, should have celebrated surviving the immediate threat. Instead, she felt strangely hollow, as though the adrenaline that had been sustaining her had suddenly drained away, leaving only exhaustion and uncertainty. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we finish the audit properly. Document everything. Give the prosecutors what they need without destroying what I've built." He touched her face gently. "And we figure out what this is between us, without the immediate threat of death." That sounds terrifying. More terrifying than Russian gangsters? In a different way. She smiled despite herself. "At least with gangsters, I know the rules. With this, with you, I have no idea what I'm doing." "Neither do I. But maybe that's okay. Maybe we figure it out together." It should have sounded absurd. Instead, it sounded like the first honest thing anyone had said to her in months, like possibility, like hope, like something worth fighting for. The Volkovs stayed away for 3 days. 3 days during which Evelyn and Luca existed in a strange liminal space between crisis and normalcy, between protection and something that felt dangerously close to domesticity. They worked together during the day, systematically documenting the financial cleanup in ways that would satisfy federal prosecutors without incriminating Luca for his uncle's original crimes. They ate dinner together in the evenings, conversations ranging from strategic planning to surprising personal revelations. And at night, Evelyn returned to her guest room alone, though the temptation to do otherwise grew stronger with each passing day. On the fourth morning, everything changed. Evelyn woke to cramping pain that radiated from her lower back around to her abdomen. At first, she dismissed it as normal pregnancy discomfort. The baby was growing rapidly now, pressing against organs and muscles in ways that created constant aches. But when she stood to use the bathroom, the cramping intensified into something sharper, more rhythmic. She checked the time. 24 weeks and 2 days. Far too early for labor, far too early for survival. The next cramp doubled her over, forcing her to grip the bathroom sink for support. When it passed, she found her hands shaking and her heart racing with a fear that had nothing to do with Russian gangsters or federal investigations. She made it back to the bed and reached for her phone, dialing the number Dr. Chen had given her for emergencies. The doctor answered on the second ring, her voice alert despite the early hour. "Evelyn? What's wrong?" "Cramping, regular contractions every 5 minutes or so." Evelyn forced herself to stay calm, to report symptoms rather than panic. "I'm 24 weeks. This isn't normal." "I'm on my way. Don't move. Stay lying down, preferably on your left side. Is Mr. DeSantis there?" "He's somewhere in the house. I can call him." Do that. He'll know what to do." Dr. Chen's voice was steady, professional. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. This might be nothing, but we're not taking chances." Evelyn disconnected and immediately called Luca. He answered before the first ring finished. "What's wrong?" No preamble, just instant alertness. "I need Dr. Chen. I'm having contractions." "She's already on her way. I'm coming to you now." He appeared in her doorway 30 seconds later, still wearing sleep pants and a t-shirt, his hair disheveled but his eyes sharp with concern. He took in her position on the bed, the way she was breathing through another contraction, and his expression shifted to something fierce and protective. "Talk to me," he said, crossing to sit beside her on the bed. "What are you feeling?" "Pain, pressure, like my body's trying to go into labor even though it's way too early." Her voice cracked on the last words. "Luca, if this baby comes now..." "It's not going to come now, doctor. Chen is going to stop it. You're going to be fine." He took her hand, his grip strong and grounding. "Breathe with me. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Focus on my voice." Evelyn wanted to tell him that breathing exercises weren't going to fix premature labor, that his reassurance was based on hope rather than medical reality. But another contraction hit, and she found herself gripping his hand hard enough to hurt, following his calm instructions because it was better than drowning in fear. Dr. Chen arrived with a medical bag that suggested she'd been prepared for exactly this scenario. She examined Evelyn with gentle efficiency, asking questions about timing and intensity while setting up portable monitoring equipment. Your cervix is starting to thin, she said after several minutes of careful assessment. Not dilating yet, but definitely irritable. We need to stop this before it progresses. She pulled medication from her bag. I'm going to give you a shot to stop the contractions. It'll make you feel shaky and anxious, but it's the fastest way to halt early labor. Will it hurt the baby? No. This medication is specifically designed for premature labor. The baby will be fine. The question is whether we can stop the contractions before they cause real cervical change. Evelyn felt the injection, felt the medication spread through her system like fire. Within minutes, her hands were trembling uncontrollably, and her heart was racing so fast she thought it might burst from her chest. But the contractions began to space out, the intensity decreasing with each cycle. Luca stayed beside her through all of it, his hand never leaving hers, his voice a steady anchor while her body betrayed her in new and terrifying ways. What caused this? He asked Dr. Chen. The stress from the Volkovs? Possibly. Stress is a significant factor in premature labor, but it could also be just bad luck. Some women's bodies are more prone to early contractions. She adjusted the monitoring equipment, studying the readouts. The good news is we caught it early. The baby's heart rate is strong. If we can keep you on bed rest for the next few weeks, we have a good chance of getting you to a safer gestational age. Bed rest, Evelyn repeated. For how long? At least 2 weeks, possibly longer depending on how things progress. No work, no stress, minimal activity. Your only job is to stay horizontal and keep this baby cooking as long as possible. The implications hit Evelyn like a physical blow. I can't. I have the audit to finish. The prosecutors are expecting my final report in 10 days. The audit will have to wait, Luca said firmly. Your health comes first. You don't understand. If I don't finish this, if I don't provide the documentation they need, everything we've worked for falls apart. The prosecutors will assume I'm compromised. They'll issue new warrants, send new auditors, potentially arrest you before we can prove the cleanup was legitimate. Dr. Chen looked between them. What am I missing here? Luca explained quickly. The federal investigation, the careful documentation of his transition from criminal empire to legitimate business, the impossibly tight timeline they'd been working under. Dr. Chen listened with the expression of someone who'd heard complicated stories before and chose not to judge. Then you'll have to find another way, she said simply. Because if Evelyn doesn't rest, she's going to lose this baby. Full stop. No negotiation. Her body is trying to go into labor at 24 weeks. That's not viable. Even if we got the baby out, the survival rates are grim and the complications are severe. You want to save both the audit and the baby? Then you figure out how to do the audit while she's on bed rest. The finality in her voice left no room for argument. Evelyn closed her eyes, feeling tears of frustration leak from the corners. Everything she'd worked for, all the careful analysis and documentation, was about to collapse because her body had chosen the worst possible moment to malfunction. We'll figure it out, Luca said quietly. I'll bring everything to you. You can work from bed, review documents, provide guidance, whatever you can do without compromising your health. That's not how audits work. I need to verify sources, cross-reference accounts, conduct interviews. Then I'll be your hands and feet. You tell me what to verify, I'll do it. You tell me what questions to ask, I'll ask them. We adapt. Dr. Chen nodded approval. That could work. As long as Evelyn stays horizontal and minimizes stress, which means you, she pointed at Luca, need to handle anything that might cause her anxiety. The Volkovs, security concerns, anything that could trigger another episode of premature labor. Understood. And Evelyn, I need you to accept that your body has limits. You're not failing anyone by needing rest. You're keeping your baby alive. Her voice softened. I know you're used to controlling everything, but pregnancy doesn't work that way. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is surrender to what your body needs. The words hit harder than Evelyn expected. She'd spent her entire adult life maintaining control, building walls, proving she didn't need anyone's help. Now she was trapped in bed, dependent on others, her carefully constructed independence crumbling under the weight of biological reality. Luca seemed to sense her internal struggle. After Dr. Chen left with instructions to call immediately if contractions returned, he settled into the chair beside the bed with his laptop. What are you doing? Evelyn asked. Working. From here. where I can help you with whatever you need. Luca, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Not because you're weak or incapable, but because right now you need support, and I'm choosing to provide it. He met her eyes. You've spent weeks helping me dismantle a criminal empire while Russian gangsters threatened your life. The least I can do is help you finish an audit while you're on bed rest. Evelyn felt something crack inside her chest, some protective barrier she'd maintained for so long she'd forgotten it was there. I'm not used to this. To what? To people staying. To help that doesn't come with conditions or expectations. Her voice was barely a whisper. The baby's father left the morning after. My family stopped calling when I made it clear I didn't need their opinions on my life choices. I've been alone so long I don't know how to do this any other way. Luca set aside his laptop and moved to sit on the edge of the bed, his hand finding hers. Then maybe it's time to learn. Because Evelyn, you're not alone anymore. Not unless you choose to be. What if I don't know how to choose anything else? Then we figure it out together. One day at a time, no pressure, no expectations beyond what you're willing to give. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. But I need you to understand something. This baby you're carrying, it doesn't make you less valuable to me. If anything, it makes me respect you more. You're creating life while fighting for survival. That's not weakness. That's strength I can barely comprehend. The tears came then, hot and sudden and unstoppable. Evelyn turned her face into the pillow, embarrassed by the emotional outburst but unable to contain it. Luca didn't try to stop her or tell her everything would be fine. He just stayed close, his hand on her shoulder, letting her cry until the storm passed. When she finally surfaced, eyes swollen and throat raw, she found him still there, patient and steady. Sorry, she managed. Don't be. You're allowed to fall apart occasionally. Especially when your body is trying to have a baby 3 months early and Russian gangsters recently threatened your life. He offered her a tissue. If anything, I'm impressed you held it together this long. Evelyn wiped her eyes, feeling wrung out but oddly lighter. I still need to finish the audit. I know. And we will. But first you need to rest. Actually rest. Not just lie down while your mind races through contingency plans. He pulled up a blanket, tucking it around her with surprising tenderness. Sleep for a few hours. When you wake up, we'll tackle the audit together. Deal? She wanted to argue, to insist she could work through exhaustion the same way she'd worked through everything else. But the medication Dr. Chen had given her was making her drowsy, and her body was demanding rest with a force she couldn't ignore. Deal, she whispered, already drifting. She woke to afternoon sunlight and the sound of Luca's voice speaking quietly on the phone. He was still in the chair beside her bed, though he'd changed clothes and clearly showered at some point. He noticed her stirring and quickly ended his call. How do you feel? He asked. Like I got hit by a truck, but the cramping stopped. She placed her hand on her stomach, feeling for movement. The baby responded with a lazy roll that made her exhale with relief. Still in there? Still okay? Dr. Chen said that was a good sign. The medication worked. He set aside his phone. I've been coordinating with Patricia and the rest of the financial team. They're gathering the documentation you need for the final report. I told them you'd be reviewing everything remotely due to a medical situation. What did you tell them exactly? That you're dealing with pregnancy complications that require bed rest. Patricia was surprisingly supportive. She said to take whatever time you need and that she'd personally verify any information you couldn't check yourself. Evelyn felt a pang of guilt for all the suspicion she'd directed at DeSantis' staff over the past weeks. That was kind of her. She respects you. They all do. You've been thorough without being accusatory, professional without being cold. That's rare in auditors. He pulled out his laptop. Are you up for some work, or do you need more rest? I need to see where we are. What's left to document? They spent the next several hours working through the remaining pieces of the audit. Luca proved to be surprisingly adept at following her instructions, asking the right questions, and gathering information with the attention to detail of someone who understood the stakes. He brought her food without being asked, adjusted pillows when she shifted position, and never once made her feel like an inconvenience. By evening, they'd made significant progress. The audit was nearly complete, just a few final verifications needed before Evelyn could write her conclusions and submit the report to the prosecutors. You know what I'm going to recommend, she said as they reviewed the final transaction logs. I'm going to document the historical criminal activity, but I'm also going to document the systematic cleanup, show the pattern of disengagement and legitimization. Luca was quiet for a moment. That could still result in charges. Historical crimes don't disappear just because I stopped committing them. True, but it gives the prosecutors context, shows intent to reform, demonstrates that the current operation is legitimate even if the foundation wasn't. She met his eyes. I can't lie in my report, but I can tell the whole truth instead of just the parts that make you look guilty. And if the whole truth still sends me to prison, then at least you'll know I tried to give you a fair assessment, that I didn't let personal feelings compromise my professional integrity. He smiled at that, a wry expression that didn't quite reach his eyes. Personal feelings, is that what we're calling this? What would you call it? Terrifying, exhilarating, completely inappropriate given the circumstances. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I keep waiting for you to realize how insane this situation is and tell me to back off, keep things professional, maintain appropriate boundaries. Is that what you want me to do? No, but I'm trying to be respectful of your choices. You're vulnerable right now, physically, emotionally, professionally. I don't want to take advantage of that. Evelyn studied his face, seeing genuine concern beneath the careful control. What if I told you that you're not taking advantage? That if anything, I'm the one who keeps crossing boundaries I know I should maintain? Then I'd say we're both making questionable decisions for someone usually so logical. Maybe logic isn't the right framework for everything. She placed her hand on her stomach where the baby was moving again, stronger now, more insistent. This whole pregnancy is illogical. Keeping it was illogical. Trusting you was illogical. But here I am, 24 weeks pregnant and on bed rest in the mansion of a man I was hired to investigate, and somehow this feels more right than anything I've done in years. Luca moved to sit on the edge of the bed again, close enough that she could feel his warmth. What are you saying, Evelyn? I'm saying I don't know what happens after the audit is finished. I don't know if the prosecutors will bring charges, or if the Volkovs will come back, or if this baby will make it to full term. But I do know that I'm tired of being alone. Tired of pretending I don't need anyone. Tired of building walls so high that nobody can reach me even when I'm drowning. His hand found hers, fingers intertwining. You're not drowning. You're treading water in the middle of a storm. There's a difference. Then help me find the shore, not because you feel obligated to protect me, but because you actually want to be part of whatever comes next. Is that what you want? For me to be part of your future even after the immediate crisis is over? Evelyn took a breath, considering the question with the same analytical precision she'd bring to a complex financial puzzle. The variables were messy: his criminal history, her pregnancy, the impossible circumstances that had thrown them together. But beneath all that chaos was something simple and undeniable. Yes, she said, I want that. I want you, not as a protector or a convenient solution to my problems, but as a partner who sees me as an equal even when I'm vulnerable. The kiss was different this time. Slower, deeper, weighted with promise instead of desperation. Luca cupped her face with both hands, his touch reverent and gentle. When they broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. I've never been part of something healthy before, he admitted quietly. Everything in my life has been transactional or dangerous or both. I don't know if I know how to do this. Neither do I. But maybe we figure it out together. You keep saying that, together, like it's easy. It's not easy, but it might be worth it. She pressed her hand over his where it rested on her stomach. This baby is going to need stability, security, a life that doesn't involve Russian gangsters and federal investigations. Can you give that? I'm already giving it. The cleanup, the legitimization, that was always about building something sustainable, something I wouldn't be ashamed to have a family know about. His eyes held hers. I just didn't expect the family to include you. Life rarely goes according to plan. Trust me, I know. They sat together in the fading light, hands joined over the baby who seemed determined to remind them both of its presence with increasingly vigorous kicks. Evelyn felt something settle inside her, a sense of rightness that had nothing to do with logic or planning and everything to do with instinct. The next 10 days passed in a blur of bed rest, remote audit work, and quiet domesticity that felt both foreign and necessary. Luca moved his office to Evelyn's guest room, working beside her while she reviewed documents and drafted her final report. Dr. Chen visited every other day, monitoring the pregnancy with increasing satisfaction as the contractions stayed away and the baby continued to grow. Patricia Chen and the DeSantis financial team proved invaluable, verifying information and gathering documentation with the efficiency of people who understood the stakes. They never asked why Evelyn was working remotely, never questioned her conclusions, simply provided what she needed and trusted her professional judgment. On the 11th day, Evelyn submitted her final report to the federal prosecutors. The document was 240 pages of meticulous analysis, documenting both the historical criminal activity and the systematic cleanup that had transformed DeSantis Import Group from a money laundering operation to a legitimate business. She made no excuses for Luca's uncle's crimes, but she also didn't hide the evidence of reform and disengagement. The response came back within 48 hours. The prosecutors wanted to meet with Luca, but not to file charges. They wanted to discuss a potential cooperation agreement, his testimony against several of his uncle's former associates in exchange for immunity on the historical crimes. "They're offering you a deal," Evelyn said, reading the email for the third time to make sure she understood correctly. "Full immunity if you testify about the organizations your uncle worked with. Help them build cases against people who are still active." Luca stared at the screen, his expression unreadable. "That means revealing everything. Every relationship, every transaction, every secret my uncle kept for 30 years. Some of those people are dangerous, vindictive. Some of those people are still hurting others, still using the infrastructure your uncle built to commit crimes. You have a chance to actually stop that instead of just walking away. And put a target on my back in the process. You already have a target on your back. The Volkovs proved that." Evelyn took his hand. "But this way, you'd have federal protection, resources, legal immunity, a clean slate to build something new." He was quiet for a long time, wrestling with the decision. Finally, he looked at her with eyes that held both fear and determination. "If I do this, if I testify and help them build cases, it could take months, maybe years. Witness interviews, depositions, trials. My life won't be my own. But it would be legal, legitimate, something you could build a future on without constantly looking over your shoulder. A future with you? With the baby?" Evelyn felt the question settle between them with the weight of genuine commitment. They'd been circling this for weeks, acknowledging attraction while carefully avoiding discussion of actual long-term plans. Now it was unavoidable. "If you want that," she said carefully, "if you're serious about being part of this child's life, about being part of my life, then yes, a future together, as a family. Even though I'm not the biological father, even though this baby doesn't have a father who wants to be involved, but it could have you if you're willing, if you choose to be present and committed rather than just convenient." Luca pulled her close, careful of her changing body, but fierce in his intensity. "I choose you, both of you. I choose to stop running from my past and start building something worth protecting. Then take the deal, testify. Help them clean up the mess your uncle left behind." Evelyn held his gaze. "And then we figure out how to build a life that doesn't involve constant danger and impossible choices." He kissed her then, deep and promising and absolutely certain. When they broke apart, he was smiling, genuinely smiling in a way she'd never seen before. "We're really doing this," he said, "building a family in the middle of chaos. Apparently, though I'd prefer if the chaos could settle down before the baby arrives. I'll see what I can do about that." The meeting with the prosecutors happened a week later. Luca agreed to their terms, full cooperation in exchange for immunity. He would testify, provide documentation, help them build cases that would dismantle what remained of his uncle's criminal network. It would be dangerous and complicated, but it would be legal. The Volkovs made one final attempt at retaliation. They sent a threatening message, made some noise about Luca being a traitor to the old ways. But with federal protection now officially in place and their primary leverage gone, they had no real power. They eventually withdrew entirely, choosing easier targets and less complicated conflicts. Evelyn remained on bed rest through her 28th week when Dr. Chen finally gave her permission to resume limited activity. The contractions never returned. The baby continued to grow, strong and healthy, and increasingly difficult to ignore as Evelyn's body expanded to accommodate new life. On a quiet evening in late April, with Evelyn 32 weeks pregnant and Luca finishing preparations for his first deposition, they sat together in the library where so much of their relationship had developed. "I've been thinking about logistics," Evelyn said, reviewing the documents spread across her lap. "After the baby comes, where we'll live, how we'll manage careers and childcare, and all the practical realities of building a life together." "And what did you conclude?" "That my apartment is too small. Your mansion is too isolated. We need something in between, something that feels like home for all three of us." Luca smiled. "I've been looking at properties. There's a house in Westchester, good schools, reasonable commute to the city, enough space for a family, but not so large that we get lost in it." "You've been house hunting?" "I've been planning, the same way you plan everything else. Contingencies and backup options and careful analysis of all variables." He moved to sit beside her, his hand settling on her very pregnant stomach. "I want to do this right, Evelyn. Not just the logistics, but the commitment, the partnership." She knew what he was asking without him having to say it explicitly. "Are you proposing?" "Not yet. I figure you might want to actually meet my family first. See if you can tolerate my mother's opinions on everything from child rearing to career choices." His eyes held hers. "But I'm telling you my intentions. I want marriage. I want permanence. I want to build something real with you." Evelyn felt tears prick her eyes, hormones and emotion combining into a response she couldn't quite control. "I want that too. But Luca, we need to be realistic. We barely know each other outside of crisis situations. What if normal life is boring? What if we don't actually work when the danger is gone? Then we'll figure it out, the same way we figured out everything else." He leaned close, his voice dropping to something intimate and certain. "I know this started with chaos, but chaos doesn't define us. What defines us is how we chose to move forward, together." The baby kicked hard against his hand as though offering an opinion on the conversation. They both laughed, the moment breaking some of the tension. "This kid is going to be a handful," Evelyn said. "Takes after the mother." "Hey, you're the one with the criminal empire and federal testimony." "Had, past tense. Now I'm just a boring import businessman with surprisingly complicated paperwork." He kissed her gently. "But I'm your boring businessman, if you'll have me." Evelyn thought about everything that had brought them to this moment. The impossible audit, the dangerous threats, the pregnancy that had forced her to accept help she'd never wanted. She thought about the future waiting beyond these walls, the child who would arrive in weeks, the life they could build if they chose to trust each other. "I'll have you," she said simply, "for as long as you want to stay." "Then I guess I'm staying forever." Outside the windows, spring was turning the gardens green with new growth. Inside, two people who'd found each other in chaos were choosing to build something stable, something real, something worth protecting, not with violence or deception, but with honesty and commitment and the simple act of showing up. The audit was finished. The danger had passed, and life, complicated and messy and absolutely terrifying, was just beginning. The contractions started at 2 in the morning on a Tuesday in early June, 6 days before Evelyn's due date. She woke to a sensation that was both familiar and terrifyingly different from the premature labor she'd experienced months earlier. This time, her body wasn't panicking. It was preparing with methodical, purposeful intensity. She reached across the bed for Luca, her hand finding his shoulder in the darkness. They'd been sharing a room for the past month, a gradual progression from his insistence on staying close for medical emergencies to an acknowledgement that neither of them slept well apart anymore. "Luca," she said quietly, "it's time." He was awake instantly, years of living on alert making him responsive even in sleep. "Contractions?" "Yes, regular, about 7 minutes apart." She breathed through another one, her hand moving to her stomach where the baby had dropped low weeks ago. "This is real. This is actually happening." Luca was already moving, turning on the bedside lamp and reaching for his phone. "I'm calling Dr. Chen. Then we're going to the hospital. How long have you been having them? Maybe an hour. I thought they were just practice contractions at first, but they're getting stronger. He made the call while helping her sit up, his movements efficient but gentle. Dr. Chen answered with the calm professionalism of someone who'd been expecting this call, instructing them to head to the hospital where she'd meet them. Luca had already packed bags weeks ago, one for Evelyn, one for the baby, emergency supplies in case labor lasted longer than expected. "Can you walk?" he asked, helping her stand. "I can walk. I'm in labor, not dying." But she gripped his arm as another contraction hit, stronger this time, demanding her full attention. When it passed, she met his eyes and saw the fear he was trying to hide beneath practical action. "Hey, we've survived worse than childbirth." "I know, but those situations didn't involve you in excruciating pain. Pain I signed up for. Pain that comes with a reward at the end." She touched his face. "I need you to stay calm. Be the steady one, because I'm about to become increasingly irrational and possibly scream at you." That got a small smile from him. "I've faced Russian gangsters and federal prosecutors. I think I can handle one woman in labor." Famous last words. The drive to the hospital was surreal, navigating dark streets while Evelyn breathed through contractions that were coming faster now, every 5 minutes, then every 4. Luca kept one hand on the wheel and one hand holding hers, his grip steady even when she squeezed hard enough to hurt during the worst of the pain. Dr. Chen met them at the entrance with a wheelchair and a nurse who whisked them through intake with impressive speed. Within 30 minutes, Evelyn was in a delivery room, changed into a hospital gown, hooked up to monitors that tracked both her contractions and the baby's heart rate. "You're at 5 centimeters, Dr. Chen announced after examining her. "Progressing nicely. First babies usually take a while, so we're probably looking at several more hours. How's your pain level?" "Manageable. For now." Evelyn gripped the bed rail as another contraction peaked. "I want to try without medication as long as possible." "That's fine. But speak up if you change your mind. There's no prize for suffering unnecessarily." Dr. Chen looked at Luca, who'd positioned himself at Evelyn's side like a sentinel. "And you? Make sure you eat something and stay hydrated. I've seen too many partners pass out during delivery because they forgot to take care of themselves." "I'm fine," Luca said, though his face was pale. "That's what they all say, right before they hit the floor." She patted his shoulder. "I'll check back in an hour. Press the call button if anything changes." After she left, Evelyn and Luca were alone in the relative quiet of the delivery room. The monitors beeped steadily, tracking heartbeats and contractions with clinical precision. Outside the window, the sky was beginning to lighten with the first hints of dawn. "Talk to me," Evelyn said during a break between contractions. "Distract me with something other than the fact that I'm about to push a human being out of my body." Luca pulled a chair close to the bed, his hand finding hers. "I finished the last deposition yesterday. The prosecutors think they have enough now to move forward with indictments against 6 of my uncle's former associates." "That's good. That's what you wanted." "It's terrifying is what it is. These are people who've built their entire lives on violence and intimidation. Now I'm the one who provided evidence against them." He paused. "But it also feels right. Like I'm finally doing something that matters instead of just trying to escape consequences." Evelyn squeezed his hand as another contraction built. "You're building something better. For yourself. For us. For this baby who's apparently very eager to meet you. I still can't believe you're letting me be part of this. That you trust me with something this important. You've earned it. Every day for the past 4 months, you've earned it." She breathed through the peak of the contraction, her grip on his hand tightening. "Besides, you're the one who stayed when everyone else left. That counts for something." The hours passed in a blur of increasing intensity. Contractions that had been uncomfortable became painful, then excruciating. Evelyn tried different positions, walked the hallways between contractions, breathed through techniques the nurse taught her. Luca stayed close through all of it, offering water and encouragement, never flinching even when she snapped at him during particularly intense moments. By noon, she was at 8 centimeters and seriously reconsidering her decision to avoid pain medication. The contractions were coming every 2 minutes now, each one feeling like her body was trying to tear itself apart. "I changed my mind," she gasped during a brief respite. I want the epidural. I want all the drugs they'll give me. Dr. Chen checked her progress and shook her head gently. You're too far along now. We're past the window for epidural, but you're almost there, maybe another hour or two. You can do this. I really can't. Yes, you can. You're one of the strongest people I know. Luca wiped sweat from her forehead with a cool cloth. You survived an audit of a criminal empire while hiding a pregnancy. You faced down Russian gangsters. You can absolutely do this. Those things didn't hurt this much. Fair point. But you're still going to do it anyway because you're stubborn and brilliant and you don't quit even when things get impossible. Evelyn wanted to argue, but another contraction hit and all her energy went into breathing through it. When it finally passed, she was crying from sheer exhaustion and pain. I'm scared, she admitted. What if something goes wrong? What if I can't do this? Then the doctors will help, but nothing is going wrong. The baby's heart rate is perfect. You're progressing exactly as you should. This is just hard, really, really hard. But hard doesn't mean impossible. The next contraction brought with it an overwhelming pressure, a need to push that overrode everything else. Dr. Chen checked her again and smiled. 10 centimeters. You're ready. Next contraction, I want you to push. Everything that came after existed in a strange space between agony and purpose. Evelyn pushed when told to push, breathed when told to breathe, existed in a cycle of effort and recovery that seemed to stretch on forever. Luca stayed beside her, letting her grip his hand hard enough to leave bruises, murmuring encouragement even when she told him to shut up. I can see the head, Dr. Chen announced. One more big push and we'll have shoulders. You're doing amazing. I hate you, Evelyn told Luca through gritted teeth. I know. You can hate me all you want as long as you keep pushing. She pushed with everything she had, feeling something shift and release. Then suddenly there was crying. Not her crying, but a baby's first outraged wail at being thrust into the world. It's a girl, Dr. Chen said, lifting a tiny, squirming infant covered in vernix and blood. A healthy, beautiful girl. They placed the baby on Evelyn's chest. This impossibly small creature with dark hair and flailing limbs and lungs that worked perfectly. Evelyn stared down at her daughter, and felt something fundamental shift in her understanding of the universe. Oh, she breathed. Oh, you're real. You're actually real. The baby blinked up at her with unfocused eyes, her crying settling into small hiccuping sounds. Evelyn touched her daughter's face with trembling fingers, tracing features that were brand new and somehow familiar at the same time. Luca was crying. She noticed it peripherally, saw tears streaming down his face as he looked at the baby with an expression of absolute wonder. She's perfect, he said hoarsely. Evelyn, she's perfect. She really is. Evelyn couldn't look away from her daughter, couldn't process anything beyond the miracle of this tiny life she'd created. We made it. We actually made it. Dr. Chen delivered the placenta and began the process of repair while nurses took measurements and cleaned the baby with gentle efficiency. 7 pounds, 3 ounces, 19 inches long. APGAR scores perfect. Every test came back exactly as it should. When they finally gave her back, cleaned and swaddled in a hospital blanket, Evelyn held her daughter close and felt tears slide down her own face. All the fear and uncertainty of the past months, all the impossible choices and dangerous situations had led to this moment. This perfect, breathing, living consequence of one mistake that had somehow become the best thing she'd ever done. What are we going to name her? Luca asked softly, his finger being gripped by impossibly tiny fingers. Evelyn hadn't wanted to choose a name before the birth, some superstitious fear that planning too much would invite disaster. But looking at her daughter now, one name felt absolutely right. Sophia. It means wisdom. She looked up at Luca. Sophia Grace Moore. Moore? He seemed surprised. Not DeSantis? Not yet. Maybe someday, if you still want that. But for now, she's mine. My daughter. My responsibility. She paused, seeing his expression shift. But I want you on the birth certificate, as her father, if you're willing to make that commitment. Luca's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing away tears. I've never wanted anything more in my life. But are you sure? Once I'm on that certificate, I'm legally bound. No walking away. No changing your mind. I'm sure. You've earned the right to be her father. Not through biology, but through choice. Through showing up every single day, even when things were terrifying and impossible. Evelyn shifted the baby so Luca could see her better. Do you want to hold your daughter? His hands shook as he took Sophia, supporting her head with the careful attention of someone terrified of making a mistake. But once she was settled in his arms, something settled in him too. He looked down at the baby with such fierce protectiveness that Evelyn felt her heart crack open even wider. Hi, Sophia, he whispered. I'm your dad. I know that's going to be confusing someday, but right now, I just need you to know that I'm going to protect you, keep you safe. Make sure you grow up in a world where you never have to be afraid. The baby yawned, unconcerned with promises or future complications. She was simply present, alive, demanding attention in the way only newborns could. They spent the rest of the day in a bubble of exhaustion and euphoria. Dr. Chen came and went, checking on Evelyn's recovery and approving her progress. Nurses taught them the basics of diapering and swaddling and recognizing hunger cues. Luca proved surprisingly competent at all of it, his hands gentle despite their size, his voice soothing when Sophia fussed. As evening fell and visiting hours ended, they were finally alone. Just the three of them in the quiet hospital room. Sophia slept in a bassinet beside the bed, making small sounds that seemed impossibly loud in the silence. What happens now? Evelyn asked quietly. After we leave here, after the chaos of newborn care settles, what does our life actually look like? Luca settled into the chair beside her bed, his hand finding hers. We move into the house in Westchester. You take your maternity leave and figure out if you want to go back to Sterling and Associates or start your own consulting practice. I continue working with the prosecutors until all the testimonies are finished, then focus on growing the legitimate parts of the business. And we raise Sophia together, as partners who chose each other instead of people thrown together by crisis. That sounds almost normal. Is that a bad thing? No, it's just unexpected. After everything we've been through, normal feels almost too simple. Normal is what we fought for, what we nearly died for. He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. I spent 10 years trying to escape my uncle's legacy. You spent months trying to maintain independence while carrying a baby alone. We both thought normal was something other people got to have. But maybe we earned it. Maybe we get to choose simple instead of complicated. Evelyn looked at Sophia, sleeping peacefully in her bassinet, oblivious to the complicated history that had brought her parents together. She's going to have questions someday, about how we met, about her biological father, about all of it. Then we'll answer them honestly. Age appropriately, but honestly. Luca's voice was firm. I'm not ashamed of our story, Evelyn. Yes, it started with chaos, but it also started with you being brilliant and brave and refusing to compromise your integrity even when it would have been easier. That's what I want Sophia to know about her mother. And about her father? What do we tell her about the man who's choosing to raise her even though she's not biologically his? We tell her that family is about choice, about showing up, about loving someone so much that biology becomes irrelevant. He met her eyes. I'm not replacing anyone, Evelyn. I'm not trying to erase the fact that another man contributed DNA. I'm just choosing to be present, to be the one who stays. Tears slid down Evelyn's face again, exhaustion and hormones and overwhelming emotion combining into something she couldn't contain. I love you. I haven't said it yet, but I do. I love you for staying. For choosing us, for being exactly what we needed even when I was too stubborn to admit we needed anything. I love you too. I think I have since that first day in the conference room when you looked at me like I was just another problem to solve. No fear, no judgment, just professional competence and absolute confidence. He leaned forward, kissing her gently. You saved me, Evelyn, not from the Volkovs or the prosecutors, but from becoming the man my uncle wanted me to be. You showed me there was another option, a better way. They sat together in the darkening room, hands joined, watching their daughter sleep. Outside the window, the city lights began to glow against the evening sky. Somewhere out there, prosecutors were building cases based on Luca's testimony. Somewhere, the Volkovs were moving on to easier targets. Somewhere, life was continuing with all its complexity and danger. But in this room, there was only simplicity. A mother, a father by choice, and a baby who represented everything they'd fought to protect. 3 days later, they brought Sophia home to the house in Westchester that Luca had purchased a month earlier. It was everything Evelyn hadn't known she wanted: spacious without being ostentatious, surrounded by trees and gardens, close enough to the city for work, but far enough for privacy. Luca had furnished a nursery with care that suggested weeks of research, choosing everything from the crib to the changing table with the same attention to detail he'd once applied to criminal enterprises. "This is really our home," Evelyn said, standing in the nursery while Luca settled Sophia into her crib for what would inevitably be a short nap before she needed feeding again. Not temporary, not protective custody, actually ours. Actually ours, Luca confirmed. "I put both our names on the deed, equal ownership, equal say in everything from paint colors to landscaping." "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did, because this isn't me providing for you. This is us building something together." He moved to stand beside her, his arm settling around her waist. "I know the past months have been about survival, about making impossible choices under extreme pressure. But now we get to make normal choices. What kind of family we want to be, what values we want to teach Sophia, what kind of life we want to build." Evelyn leaned into his warmth, watching their daughter sleep with the absolute trust only newborns possessed. "I want to be the kind of family where honesty matters more than perfection, where mistakes don't define us but how we respond to them does. Where Sophia grows up knowing she's loved not because she's perfect, but because she exists. I want that too. And I want her to see parents who respect each other, who work through problems instead of running from them, who chose each other deliberately instead of settling for convenience." He kissed the top of Evelyn's head. "We can give her that. We can be that." The first weeks of parenthood were exactly as chaotic as everyone had warned, and nothing like what Evelyn had imagined. Sophia had opinions, loud opinions about feeding schedules, diaper changes, and the unacceptable crime of being put down when she wanted to be held. Sleep became a precious commodity measured in 90-minute increments. Showers became luxuries, and the concept of a full meal consumed while still hot became a distant memory. Through all of it, Luca was present. He woke for midnight feedings, changed diapers without complaint, walked the floors with a crying baby at 3 a.m. while Evelyn caught desperately needed sleep. He learned to interpret different types of cries, mastered the art of the one-handed bottle preparation, and proved surprisingly good at the chaotic juggling act that was newborn care. "You're a natural at this," Evelyn said one evening, watching him soothe Sophia after a particularly fussy day. "Better than I am, honestly." "That's not true. You're amazing with her." "I panic when she cries. You stay calm." "I've had practice staying calm under pressure. Doesn't mean I'm not terrified I'm doing everything wrong." He adjusted Sophia in his arms, her small body finally relaxing against his chest. "But I'm also grateful. For this. For you. For the chance to be part of something this important." Evelyn moved closer, completing the circle of their small family. "You know she's going to grow up calling you Dad. She's not going to understand the complexity of how we got here. To her, you'll just be the person who is always there." "Good. That's exactly what I want to be, the person who's always there." 6 weeks after Sophia's birth, Evelyn received a call from Martin Sterling. Her boss had been patient about her maternity leave, sending congratulations when Sophia was born, but otherwise leaving her alone to adjust to motherhood. Now, his voice on the phone carried both warmth and business. "I wanted to check in," he said, "see how you're managing and discuss your plans for returning to work." Evelyn looked around the living room where Sophia was napping in her swing and Luca was working at the dining table, his legitimate business now consuming most of his time. "I've been thinking about that, about what I want my career to look like now that everything has changed." "And what did you conclude?" "That I don't want to come back to Sterling and Associates. Not because of anything you did wrong, but because I need something more flexible, more independent. I'm thinking about starting my own forensic accounting consultancy, working from home, choosing my own cases, building something that fits around family rather than the other way around." There was a pause. That's a big step. Risky, especially with a new baby. I know, but I also know I'm good at what I do. Good enough that clients will come to me regardless of whether I have a big firm behind me. She took a breath. And I have support now. A partner who's invested in making this work. Financial stability that gives me room to take that risk. Then I wish you the best of luck. And Evelyn? If you ever need a reference or want to discuss complex cases, my door is always open. Thank you, Martin, for everything, for giving me the DeSantis case even though it was impossibly complicated. That case changed your life, in ways I never could have predicted. She looked at Luca, who'd glanced up from his work to smile at her, but I think it changed it for the better. After disconnecting, she spent the next hour sketching out business plans and calculating financial projections. By the time Sophia woke demanding attention, Evelyn had the outline of something that could actually work. A consultancy that combined her expertise with the flexibility she needed as a new mother. That evening, after Sophia was fed and bathed and sleeping in her bassinet upstairs, Evelyn and Luca sat together on the couch with glasses of wine, her first since before the pregnancy. The house was quiet in the way it only got after the baby was down for her first stretch of sleep, a peace that would last maybe 2 or 3 hours before the next feeding. I made a decision today, Evelyn said. About work, about the future. Tell me. She explained her plan for the consultancy, the freedom it would give her, the risk it represented. Luca listened without interruption, his attention focused entirely on her words. What do you think? She asked when she finished. I think you're one of the most brilliant people I've ever met, and if anyone can build a successful independent practice, it's you. He set down his wine glass. I also think I should tell you my plans, so we're on equal footing. What plans? I've been approached by several organizations about consulting work, using my knowledge of import logistics and international business to help legitimate companies navigate complex regulatory environments. It's legal, it pays well, and it would let me work from home most of the time. He paused. I've been hesitant to accept because I didn't want to make decisions that affected our family without discussing them first. Evelyn felt warmth spread through her chest at the words, our family. 6 months ago, she had been alone, planning to raise a baby single-handedly, convinced that independence was the only path to security. Now she had a partner who consulted her before making career decisions, who thought in terms of shared futures instead of individual choices. I think you should take the consulting work, she said. If it's what you want, if it feels right for where you are now. What I want is to build something I can be proud of, something Sophia can know about without shame or secrecy. His hand found hers. I want to be the kind of father who goes to school events and coaches soccer teams and embarrasses his daughter by asking too many questions about her friends. She's 6 weeks old, might be a little early for soccer. I'm planning ahead. You taught me that. Always have a strategy. They laughed, the sound quiet but genuine. Outside, summer darkness had fallen completely, wrapping the house in cocoon of privacy. Upstairs, their daughter slept peacefully, unaware of the careful planning happening on her behalf. We should probably talk about marriage, Luca said after a moment. Officially. Not just intentions, but actual timeline. Evelyn's heart rate kicked up despite herself. Are you proposing? Not yet. I want to do it properly. Ring, romantic setting, the whole thing. But I want to know if you're ready for that conversation. If you've moved past seeing this as temporary crisis management into actual long-term commitment. She thought about it carefully, analyzing her feelings the way she'd analyze a complex financial structure. The variables were different now. No immediate danger, no federal investigation, no pregnancy hormones clouding judgment. Just two people who'd chosen each other repeatedly over months of impossible circumstances, who'd built trust through action rather than words, who'd proven they could work as a team even when everything was falling apart. I'm ready, she said. Not today. I'm still figuring out how to shower regularly and form complete sentences on 3 hours of sleep. But soon. When we've had time to exist as a normal couple instead of people constantly fighting for survival. Define soon. 6 months? A year? Long enough to prove this isn't just crisis bonding, but not so long that we're overthinking it into paralysis. Luca smiled. Very analytical. Very you. Someone has to be practical in this relationship. True. I'll handle the romance, you handle the logistics. We'll meet somewhere in the middle." They sat together in comfortable silence, finishing their wine while the house settled around them. In 6 weeks, their lives had transformed completely. The audit was finished, the Volkovs were gone, the federal cases were proceeding without drama. Luka's testimony had proven valuable enough that prosecutors were treating him as a cooperative witness rather than a suspect. The past was being systematically dismantled while the future took shape. 3 months later, on a crisp October afternoon, Luka proposed properly. He'd planned it carefully. A walk through the gardens behind their house while Sophia napped in her stroller, autumn leaves painting the world in gold and crimson, a ring that was elegant without being ostentatious tucked into his jacket pocket. "Evelyn Moore," he said, stopping beside a fountain they'd installed the previous month, taking both her hands in his. "7 months ago, you walked into my office to audit my company and accidentally saved my life. You saw past the surface to the man I was trying to become. You trusted me when you had every reason not to. You let me be part of your family when you'd planned to do everything alone. Luka, let me finish, please." He took a breath, his hands tightening on hers. "I know our story isn't conventional. I know we met under circumstances that should have kept us apart. But I also know that I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. I love your brilliance and your stubbornness and the way you solve impossible problems like they're just interesting puzzles. I love how you are with Sophia. I love the life we're building together." He released one of her hands to pull out the ring, a simple platinum band with a single diamond that caught the afternoon light. "I want to make this official. I want to marry you, not because we need the legal protection or the societal approval, but because I want the world to know that I chose you, that we chose each other. Will you marry me?" Evelyn looked at the ring, at the man holding it, at their daughter sleeping peacefully in her stroller, oblivious to the moment that would define her family's future. She thought about the woman she'd been 7 months ago, isolated, defensive, convinced that independence was the only path to safety. That woman wouldn't recognize the person she'd become. Someone who'd learned that strength could include vulnerability, that protection didn't mean weakness, that love was a choice worth making even when it was terrifying. "Yes," she said, her voice steady and certain. "Yes, I'll marry you. I choose you. I choose us. I choose this beautiful, complicated, absolutely perfect life we've built from chaos." Luka slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her with a fierceness that still made her breath catch. When they broke apart, Sophia had woken and was watching them with wide eyes, as though she knew something important had just happened. "Your parents are getting married, baby girl," Luka told her, lifting her from the stroller, "which means you're stuck with both of us forever." Sophia responded by grabbing his nose and making happy babbling sounds that might have been approval or might just have been gas. Either way, Evelyn laughed with pure joy, wrapping her arms around both of them. They married 3 months later in a small ceremony at their home in Westchester. Martin Sterling attended, along with Patricia Chen and several other members of the DeSantis Import Group team who'd become genuine friends. Dr. Chen was there with her husband, having shepherded both Sophia's birth and Evelyn's recovery with skill and compassion. Even a few of Luka's family members made the trip from Italy, his mother weeping openly when she met Sophia for the first time. The ceremony was simple, personal, focused on commitment rather than spectacle. They wrote their own vows, standing in the same gardens where Luka had proposed while Sophia watched from her grandmother's arms. "I promise to choose you every day," Evelyn said, her voice carrying clearly in the winter air. "Not because it's easy, but because you're worth choosing. I promise to be honest even when it's difficult, to trust you with my fears and weaknesses, to build a life with you based on respect and partnership rather than dependence or obligation." Luka's vows were equally direct. "I promise to protect you not by controlling you, but by standing beside you when you need support. I promise to be the father Sophia deserves, to raise her with love and honesty and the knowledge that family is about choice. I promise to never stop working to be worthy of the trust you've placed in me." When they kissed, sealing vows that felt more like acknowledgement than promise, Sophia chose that moment to start crying. Everyone laughed, the solemnity breaking into joy and chaos in exactly the way their lives seemed to operate. The reception was small and warm, filled with people who'd supported them through impossible circumstances. Evelyn danced with her husband, a concept that still felt new and wonderful, while Sophia napped in her portable crib, exhausted from being the center of attention. We did it, Luca murmured against her hair. Built something real out of complete chaos. We really did. Evelyn leaned into his warmth, feeling the solid weight of her wedding ring, the presence of their daughter nearby, the security of a future they'd fought to create. What do you think comes next? More chaos, probably. Sophia's going to be mobile soon. We'll have to child-proof everything. I meant bigger picture. I know, but I'm learning to focus on the immediate rather than always planning 5 steps ahead. Right now, in this moment, we have everything we need. Tomorrow can take care of itself. It was unlike him to be so present-focused, and Evelyn recognized it as growth. They'd both changed over the past months, softening edges that had been necessary for survival but weren't required for life. Learning to trust, to be vulnerable, to accept help without seeing it as weakness. As the evening wore on and guests began to leave, Evelyn found herself standing in the nursery with Sophia in her arms. The baby was almost 6 months old now, her personality emerging daily. Stubborn like her mother, gentle like her father, endlessly curious about everything. She would grow up knowing only love and stability, never understanding how close she'd come to a very different life. Luca appeared in the doorway, loosening his tie with the relief of someone who'd made it through a social obligation successfully. Ready for bed? More than ready. Today was perfect, but I'm exhausted. Then let's put our daughter down and get some sleep. Tomorrow we start our life as an actual married couple. They settled Sophia in her crib together, a nightly ritual they'd perfected over months of practice. The baby protested sleepily but ultimately surrendered to exhaustion, her small body relaxing into the familiar comfort of her crib and her room and her parents' presence. Standing there in the soft glow of the nightlight, Evelyn felt a contentment she'd never experienced before. This was what she'd been searching for all those years of building walls and maintaining independence. Not isolation, but belonging. Not control, but partnership. Not perfection, but honest, messy, beautiful reality. Thank you, she whispered to Luca as they left the nursery. For what? For staying. For choosing us. For being exactly what we needed, even when I was too stubborn to admit we needed anything. He pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her with the easy familiarity of someone who knew her body as well as his own. You saved me first. Everything else is just me returning the favor. They made love that night with the tenderness of new commitment and the familiarity of months of partnership. Afterward, lying tangled together in sheets that smelled like home, Evelyn felt the last pieces of her old life. The isolation, the fear, the conviction that she had to do everything alone, finally released their grip. She'd walked into an impossible audit 7 months ago carrying secrets and building walls. She'd emerged with a daughter, a husband, and a life she'd never planned but couldn't imagine living without. The accounting had balanced in the end, though not in any way she could have predicted. The numbers told a story of transformation, criminal to legitimate, isolated to partnered, alone to family. The story of 2 people who'd found each other in chaos and chosen to build something permanent from the wreckage. As she drifted towards sleep, Sophia's soft breathing audible through the baby monitor and Luca's warmth solid beside her, Evelyn thought about the woman she'd been that first day in the DeSantis conference room. That woman wouldn't recognize this life, wouldn't believe it was possible. But that woman had never experienced the particular magic of being truly seen, truly chosen, truly loved for exactly who she was rather than what she could provide. That woman had survived. But this woman, wife, mother, partner, was finally learning to thrive. And somewhere in the distance, morning was waiting with all its promise of normal days and ordinary joys and the beautiful, complicated adventure of building a life worth living. Together.